allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All suitured up?
All suitured up.
All right, I'll call the roll. Jana Dykett.
Present.
Kelly Winthrop.
Present.
Timothy West.
Present.
Joe Crosby.
Present.
Amelie Bruce. Present. Josh DeAndewale.
Present.
And I am also present. Adjustments to the agenda.
There are none this evening.
There are no minutes to consider, so we will go right to the superintendent report.
I did submit that in advance, so I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about that. A number of those things are on the agenda already, so we can talk about that at the appropriate time. A couple of things that I want to share with you. Most of you are pretty familiar with at least two of these. The president yesterday released a statement basically saying that he would like all teachers to be vaccinated by the end of March. I think that's a bold move, and I hope it can happen. We've contacted a person who we've somewhat contracted with, who said they would come here. So I don't know. It isn't, for me, it isn't a question of. It's a question of availability of supply. You know, we can get somebody here, but if there's no vaccinations with them, then that's not going to happen. So I think that is exciting news. Ultimately because it does speak to the commitment to doing what we can to get schools back in session. But I'm going to say to you all again, because I'm sure you'll have community people, asking you, we cannot truly consider return to school at 100% until we have, until the rules of social distancing are lessened. Right now, they're still expecting 6 feet. You can come 3 feet, but there's a bunch of additional restrictions that go with that around mask breaks and such. So at this point, we are not able to do that. But I will just put out there for you to think about. It's a conversation we need to have fairly soon. If things don't change and we feel like we need to have remote learning opportunities for students in the fall, then I think what our goal, our hope or our plan should be is to have about 80% of our students as we have right now attending 5 days a week, not 4 days a week. So that's kind of where we're going. My hope still is that we will be 100% of our students 100% of the time. And I think this is a good step in that direction. I do want to quickly, first of all, I want to thank most of you responded to me yesterday. I sent out an email. It was a very tricky call yesterday about the early release. I think early release are really disruptive. Early releases in the middle of the day are the most disruptive thing that we do. I thought I would get inundated. I stayed here for, I wanted to make sure all the buses were home, and I stayed here till after that. And I didn't get a single phone call. I didn't hear anything today. And I think I sent out a message to all of you, and I appreciate your response. It was for me, it still feels like it was the right call because even here at the grade school, when power came back on, the furnace didn't come back on. So we were still, it was very, 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 very cold. It was cold before that, so it was even colder after that. So all of the issues were rectified. Again, it was a nice thing that we didn't have Wednesdays, we don't have students here, so anything that we needed to do to sort of get things back in order, we were able to take care of it today. So I do appreciate the support. And lastly, in my addition list, I'm pleased to announce that we finally have our canine, our side-by-side, I don't know what you want to call it, from Coyote. It did arrive today. Joel sent me a picture of it. It's pretty impressive, and we'll be putting it to good use real soon. We have inquired, put a little pressure, a little tiny bit of pressure. on Charlie's to see when the arrival date is gonna be for our band. That's a different story. They basically, we knew it was gonna have to be factory assembled and then whatever. So I guess I was hoping we'd see it before now, but I'm not totally surprised. I just would like to be able to report a expected delivery date. And we knew that was gonna happen for Kelly and Tim. You may or may not be aware that we purchased a van using CRF 2 funds, and we only did that after they relaxed the expectation that everything had to be delivered by the end of the year. You not only had to pay for it, but initially everything had to be delivered and paid for by December 30th, not 31st, December 30th. And then when they quickly changed that expectation when they realized that every single school in the entire state of Maine and pretty much anybody who was going to get the stimulus money throughout the country was going to be investing heavily in technology. And the chances for them to be able to deliver all of that technology by the end of December was a virtual impossibility. So once they relaxed that expectation, they had to relax it for all. And that allowed us to purchase that van. So hopefully I can report to you when it comes. But very happy to have the K9 here. So I have no appointments, resignations, retirements, or transfers to report to you tonight. So I would be happy to answer any questions you have about what I just said or on my superintendent's report. Josh has a question.
Yeah, Ollie and I were talking a little bit about the, for next year, for the early release kind of, or like planned delay. We were wondering if we could open that up to the students with a poll maybe, or a survey to get some student input on that. That we just.
Are you talking about for the calendar or you talking about?
Yeah, for like calendar, the one about, to eliminate the early release once a month, and replace them with like a 1 hour delayed start on Wednesdays.
Well, let's see, it's on the schedule for the board to consider, so they can, if they don't want to consider it tonight, they can talk about that. And that whole conversation about whether it's an early release or delayed start, Wednesday, people sitting around this table have more history with that in this community because it's not the first time it's come up than I do, so let's wait and defer it then. And I would just say for the board's sake, if you want to postpone that, it's not a great burden to think about postponing that. Any other questions from anyone? That is my report then.
Okay. Committee report, chair report, I have none. So now we'll go to committee reports. Finance.
Nothing to report.
Okay, for policy committee, we'll have several policies for second reading during our old business. So we'll go over those then. Negotiations?
Okay. We continue to meet on a bi-weekly basis with the WPS, and we're continuing to kind of hammer out some language changes that both sides have requested, and looking at the salary structure as well. So at this point, nothing really new to report.
Okay, thank you. Anything for curriculum?
Nope, not right now.
And how about renovation, new construction?
No.
No. All right then, well, we can move on to Mr. Campbell, who's going to talk about the class of 2021 year-end activities.
Good evening. Actually, I'm going to do the talking, but I'll tell you, Joel and I have been doing all the legwork, so it's just me. Joel is part of this. So we have 3 events we're going to do for our seniors, very similar to the events that have always happened here at Winthrop, which unfortunately were interrupted last spring due to COVID. The first one will be our senior assembly, and the senior assembly will be in the afternoon of Thursday, June 3rd. Initially, as we were thinking and talking, we were planning on having this activity run very similar to our town meetings, where we pull the seniors into the park, and we were going to recognize we're able to do that for town meetings because of remote learners. So once we bring our remote learners into the picture, we then have to look at doing our activity for senior assembly out on the field. And I haven't told the young lady behind me that yet, which we're gonna ask her to help us stream the final assembly live so that parents will be able to see it as well as students throughout the building in their advisory. So again, that's Thursday, June 3rd. Class night, as we did last year, we are going to record class night, and it will be broadcast or streamed, I don't have the correct terminology, out on Friday, June 4th at 6 p.m. And this is the graduation activity where we present special recognition to the seniors and scholarships. So we will be recording that. We'll be handing out the actual certificates and recognitions at graduation day. The members of the community have in the past come to our class night to present. We are going to put it out. We have already actually extended an invitation for them to actually come in, work with Ms. Shar again to do their recordings at the school using our backdrop, and we will just meld that right into our portion of the presentations. Graduation. Graduation is going to be at the high school. We met with the senior class. We talked about what they would like to see, and we talked with the parents who are very much involved in developing the project graduation that happens after graduation to get their input. And it was loud and clear, they wanted it, if possible, at the high school. So, because of the class size being above 50, we've got to have it outside. So, Joel and I looked at the front of the building, and we feel that we can do a setup where the buses run through, where we can develop something where we can use our risers that we have for our music program to seat the seniors, properly distanced, and then park the families in the student parking area out front. I have reached out to Mom at 10 because it is Maine, so June 6th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they could be doing one or two things. It could be nice and sunny and 100 degrees, or it could, we could get a shower. So I reached out to them to get prices on tents. She has given me some prices. It averages about $700 per tent. So that would be something we would have to budget for. The other thing, and we're still working, we have the equipment, the streaming equipment in the building. We have had technical issues with our town meeting, so I reached out to Headlight in Portland, who helped us last year, just so that we have them as a backup, and for them to come up and help us out with a Jumbotron sound streaming equipment and an FM frequency. Their cost again is around $10,000, which is what they quoted us last year. And I think everybody was very happy with that. So if we have to. So again, that's during Sunday, June 6th. And then, hopefully, everybody will be happy and get their diploma from, I'm not sure whether it's the superintendent or the chair. The other things that we're going to do, that we're going to continue, two things we're going to continue. Last year, we bought lawn signs, and I've already received a quote from the company who did it last year, and we're going to get those developed for all the seniors in the class. The other thing that I asked for, and I haven't received the price on those yet, but DR Design also did these masks. I would like all the kids to have the same color mask, try to get it as close to their gown color with white on the front that says Winthrop Ramblers class of 2021. So I'm working on that. Another activity that, whoops, I have pictures. I took a hand up forgot to show, remind me, Mr. Allen. Here's what the lawn signs look like.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. That's what the lawn signs look like. And this is what the mask looks like. Although I don't know why the actual mask down below is black, but.
So will this sign have the same this time?
Probably. I'll make sure we take care of that.
Just
Sorry.
wanna make sure, 'cause it should be consistent.
So, we already have a quote for the lawn signs, I'm waiting for the quote on the mask. And another tradition we're gonna start back up, we were unable to do it last year because we just weren't physically in the building. Guidance and teachers work to ensure that each of the members of the class received a t-shirt from either the school they're going to, or if they're going to the military, from the military branch that they're going into. And we do a little research, try to figure out what those students who are going right from graduation into the workforce, what they want to do, and we design and get them a t-shirt that makes them feel recognized and valued as well. That is what we have planned right now, all subject to change. I mean, we're hoping that a lot more flexibility from the government as more people get get their vaccines. Any questions?
It's just a quick question.
Sure.
Are these signs just came about because of COVID, or were they here before?
It's my understanding last year was the first year that we had done those.
So I
in the town.
just think that's even post-COVID, I think that's a cool thing to maybe think about continuing. Because I moved here last year, I just was seeing them around, and I thought it was a really nice thing, even when COVID's done.
I agree. It's a nice way to support and advertise.
Just because I don't know the answer. How are these things funded?
Mr. Superintendent? That's what we did last year. Because we weren't in school,
Yep.
and, last year we had monies that we didn't expend because of, just we weren't here. So, for example, transportation was an area that we had money left over in line.
So that really is essentially the answer this year. It's a different ballgame if we have schools, so we're putting together next year's budget, which we'll be talking about in a few minutes, based upon an expectation that we're 100%. But if we're not, then we're gonna be in the same situation. I'm not saying that the town, I don't want to say publicly that there's gonna be a healthy balance, but there's gonna be a pretty healthy balance. There's certainly more than enough to cover. Just in transportation alone, as Mr. Campbell has already said, there'll be enough to cover these costs.
Thank you.
Important question.
Thank you.
Well, and I was gonna say, do we need to discuss, because I don't wanna see us miss out on any of these things because of budget yet, so do we need to, say, go ahead and book, or, you know what I mean, or is that okay?
I've already given Mark the okay to go ahead
Good,
with
awesome.
everything that he's talked about tonight, with the exception of the mask, but I kind of had a sense that was coming, because I got your email from that company. I know we can cover.
Good, awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're
Anything
welcome.
for Josh is what I said, I think.
Any other questions? Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Campbell is going to be leaving, so
Yeah.
he won't be around.
But the basketball game's all over.
So we can cut anything from the high school tonight that we want.
Perfect.
Oh, darn! The Shaw's still here, holding down the fort.
Spoiled again.
Okay, old business, the 2021-2022 budget.
No,
No.
we gotta go to the policies.
That's what
Oh,
I
it is
wanted.
the first thing on the old business.
Oh, I'm sorry, I turned the page on you.
Yeah,
That's okay.
I guess that maybe I'm not really wanting to talk this much. No, I actually included in your packet tonight with an updated summary sheet. And that's, you know, this is still a work in progress, so I discovered an error after, that I, sorry about that, let me turn this phone off. And it really is in the area of, revenues, down at the bottom. Main care, that should be reduced by, 30,000. That should be 115, not 145. And it should show a net reduction of 30,000, and that's going to change, obviously change the bottom line. So I want to start with this summary sheet and just make that error. I mean, just make that correction. And I want to just say that I really like the way we did this. So there's really kind of two documents that are being worked on kind of simultaneously. One is what I refer to as unofficial, and one is official. That may seem a little strange, but what is official here is what goes into ADS. That's our accounting software. And that, Amanda does that. And the only one who makes any changes in ADS is Amanda. So that is accurate to the extent that, you know, what we put in is exactly what we need to put in. And then she and I were working from a spreadsheet that is on a Google, well, it's on the Sheets Google Doc. And I said to her, that's the unofficial one. So she keeps the ADS one updated, and then she gives me a printout. And then as I look to make additional cuts, which I'll review with you in a second, then I get a new bottom line number. And then I compare that to what her bottom line is on the official one. And in this case, part of the reason I'm sharing all that with you is our numbers came out exactly the same.
Awesome.
Which is, yes, that's very good news. And when I say that, I'm really talking about the top, well, if you look at the articles over on the left, the top 14 articles, which include adult ed and school nutrition. And so those numbers are accurate. I hand wrote in the adult ed and school nutrition numbers, so you can see those. And as I said, the bottom numbers are accurate with the exception of the main care, which should be 115,000, and a reduction of 30,000. So if you want to pencil those in. So having said that, what I want to point out to you first is back at the top, the major budget, the regular budget, the regular budget, which excludes adult ed and school nutrition. At one point I reported to you that we were, the initial request budget, which is what I referred to it as, was somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 over this current FY21 budget. And I have these other draft documents that I've been keeping track of, so I can look back historically. It goes back to, I didn't have it print the first one, but the first one shows an increase from budget to budget of 422,000, and then that actually went up to over 500,000. And so then we've been slowly but surely continuing to scrutinize and look through the budget to get to a point where I think we have something we can. You know, I'm not trying to short circuit any conversations. I asked you guys to go look, and I asked you to ask questions, so that I can be fully prepared. And all of the administrators, except for the high school administrators, are available. Ms. Chris is online, Aaron Weeks is online, Josh is online, Mike is online, Sue is online for various reasons. So any questions that you have that I can answer, I will certainly turn to them for help. But what I want to point out is in that in the column that says difference, if you go all the way to the bottom of article where it says total 1 through 11, the budget increase as of today is $5,119.50 less than the budget we're operating in right now. So we have a net reduction budget to budget. And that's I think that's a great effort on everybody's part. And I'm going to talk about some things that were added and some things that were subtracted because it wasn't wasn't just taking things away. But if you go all the way to the bottom, amount to be raised locally, it says right now $279,974.48. However, as I just pointed out, that was, I missed that mistake on the revenue. So the actual, you can add 30,000 that, so it'll be $309,974.48 is what we'd have to ask for from the taxpayers right now. I shared that number briefly with Mr. Colbrook today, but that's a different conversation. I don't really want to have that now. I'm just trying to keep him in the loop. And I just think this is a great effort on the administrative team's part to bring in a budget that's very responsive to the difficulties that people have had over this year. We have no control over the fact that we essentially have lost $320,000 in revenue, and I think it's the best we can do. Certainly, if you guys ask some questions, either want to add some things or subtract more, that is your prerogative. And so that's my overview, so let's begin. Kelly?
So many questions. I want to preface this by saying I'm asking these questions just to get information, not based on any judgment. And I just want that to be really clear, because some of them might sound like, why do we need that? And it's really not that question.
Yep.
So to start, can you tell me, you might not know, how many taxpayers this 309,974 is spread across?
Yeah, I actually don't know that.
Okay.
Jana or Joe, you guys are the town historians.
How many taxpayers are like in Winthrop?
Yeah, that this increase.
I have no idea.
I don't know the answer to that question, but obviously this is being recorded, so we will make sure to
Okay.
make a list of the questions.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at your running explanation of the budget
Yep.
from today that lists the updates.
Yep.
So on Article 2, the special education, that reduction was because of the cut of 6 ed techs, right?
Well, 3 last year and 3 this year.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. And then on, yeah, I just asked that question. Okay, so on this, which is the total school revenue,
Yep.
okay. The miscellaneous revenue, line 41992. It's the 4th line down.
Yes.
How is that over 100%?
That's a darn good question. It's just I'm gonna flag that up. I'm gonna just say that that's an actual accounting, and if that's an error, that's gonna be the audit will, the audit won't pick this one up. That's very interesting, because if that's the case, if I find out a good answer to that question, that will further, if you go back and look at the projected revenues I have for this one, for miscellaneous revenue, I only have $15,000 in there. So that would be a huge change to that.
Okay. Can you tell me what percentage of the school year remains?
Yeah, I usually try to do, you know what, I kind of forgot to put that on here, but this is, we have March, April, May, June, so that's a quarter of the year. We're 3/4 of the way through the year.
Okay. And if there's any money in any of these accounts left over at the end of the year, do they just roll over to next year, or do you
No.
have to do something with them?
No, that's a great question, and I think it's important that everybody understands that we don't have, we don't have the authority, unless we specifically ask the community to give us authority to keep that money. It all gets, I get the term that is used, and I'm not sure I love that, but it is probably accurate. Any money that's left over is swept back into the town. The town collects it all. And in the future, that's the sort of the bad news. In the future, when we are in agreement that there is no money that's owed to the, for summer salaries and such, then some or all of that money can be used to offset taxes. But it doesn't simply just roll forward. It would have to be you pointed out, actually, if you look on my sheet here, other revenue would probably have something like an audited amount carried forward. If you look at other school systems that are whole, they would have that as well.
Can I just follow up on that?
What?
Just need to follow up on that.
Sure, go ahead.
I thought there was a rule that says that we can carry over 3%.
No, if you carry over more than 3%, you could get penalized for it. But that's you have to, before you can carry anything over, you have to make everything has to be whole. So right now everything is not whole. So any money that is left over goes to pay down that indebtedness, and that amount that's in debt or we're in debt is everybody's not in agreement on what that is at this point. So that's probably the best way I could say that. But at the end of the day, I mean, I hate to say it because I know we look at things differently, but if we are, say in theory, whole, and I don't think we are, I'm of the opinion that we do still owe money, based upon the work, the research that I've done, then that money goes back to the town, who then ultimately either pays down the town side, which goes back to the same taxpayers that that we're paying our budget. So it's, in one way or another, if we're whole, the money goes to offset future taxes, whether they're town taxes or school taxes. I'm very clear about what I just said, that if we went to an agreement that we're all whole, then what you're referring to, Joe, is then hypothetically, let's say we have 5% of our budget left at the end of the year, then we can carry over up to 3% of that. We'll have a totally different conversation if that happens, because what I always warn people about in terms of they think, well, that's nice to give it back to the taxpayers. It feels like the really right thing to do, but it's a little tiny bit short-sighted, because if you don't have that amount of money to carry over every year, then you build yourself a hole for the following year. So you just have to be careful.
And so the sweep back to the town, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. My thought is that that would be to pay for that accounting error that happened a few years ago?
Yeah, that's where the discrepancy, so that's where I don't know what the right word is, that's where the disagreement is on where that stands.
And is it a disagreement in amount or in reason?
No, it's a disagreement in amount at this point.
Okay.
I think, and again, particularly Jan and Joe, you were here during that time. I don't think there's any. I think there was a lot of time that was spent on trying to figure out who was to blame for whatever happened. I think, and I wasn't here, but I know with the current administration on the town side, myself and whatever, that's less of a concern and more about just trying to figure out what the number is, what the difference is. We're really hoping, and nobody's asked me this yet, but I'll bring it up, that when we get when we have the auditor here, that we get a really clear answer from her about what the actual number is. I can only tell you this, that there is a person who works in the town office now who is a former auditor for the firm that was employed by this town during that era. And she takes a look at the information that is available from the last couple years' audit, and she's of the opinion that there's still money that's owed. And we sat down with her, our auditor, town manager, myself. We went through all that information that was available at the time, So we'll see what it looks like when we get the entire audit report in, and Jennifer is the auditor from RKO, that's our audit firm, and she will be coming to meet with you once that audit report is 100% done.
I just want to ask one more question.
You can ask 100 more questions.
I have 100 more questions. I can only ask one.
Well, what I'm concerned about is that it would seem to me that we can specify saving money for a special purpose.
Yes,
Okay. So it's possible to move money into that particular account just simply based on having a balance.
there has to be agreement, when the accounts are not full, then we would have to get special permission, not just from the taxpayers, but also from the town, because essentially, if we're in debt to the town, then we can't say, well, we're not gonna pay you this year, we're just gonna set money aside to pay for some special project that we want to do. So the provisions are there, but the conditions have to be there as well.
I recognize what you were just telling me, but I just have kind of how much longer do you expect that we'll be paying for that accounting error?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that, and I'm not trying to avoid it, but I think it all depends. If it's a smaller amount, say in the 200 or 300 or 1,000, then it could be paid off in a year or two. It's entirely, and I hate to project because part of it is because it's public and whatever, but you know, it's possible that we may have a healthy balance this year, and that may possibly pay it all down. But I can promise you, this budget that we're working on right now will not be a hefty balance at the end of the year.
Right.
It's very, very lean. So if it's closer to $800,000 or $900,000, then it's probably going to be another 3 or 4 year process to pay it down.
It just doesn't make sense to me that we're asking to increase the budget every year, which increases people's taxes. If we have money left over at the end of the year, why can't we use that for the next year as well?
Well, because we have to, we can't, we're not allowed. So the simple answer is really this, and I know, and just keep asking it so I can help you understand it, because for me it's really clear. Particularly in a single municipality like Winthrop, it doesn't make any sense for one entity that is essentially not required by law, but by practice, towns. All towns have a all towns have a expectation that they keep, I think it's 2 or 3 months operating costs. That's what they're asked to do. They're asked to do that because essentially it's almost like a rainy day fund. So in one organization, why would you have one entity that has to save and the other one also save? Because what you're saving, or what you're encumbering, for lack of a better term, is taxpayers' money. We're charged with, I feel we're charged with, we ask for $12 million, we spend $12 million. If we only spend $11,500,000, then we return that $500,000 that we didn't spend, and we ask the taxpayers for a new budgeted number. So it just doesn't make sense to me, I guess, and it's certainly been my experience, more jumbled than other, when I was in an RSU or an SAD before that, it was even less clear. Because in that case, depending on the number of towns you have in the SAD or the RSU, it's 4 towns that are saving, and in this case, it's only one. It's only one.
Just to add to that, obviously, we don't get to choose what happens to that money. It's the town's choice. There was, I think it was the first year, we had quite a substantial leftover balance, and the town sort of banked it, and they chose not to either cut down taxes. And again, it does ultimately all come from the same pool. And I don't know if they put it towards debt or if they put it towards something else, but they decided not to use it to cut taxes. So ultimately, that is the town's decision. We have no say in that whatsoever. If we have a balance, it goes back to the town, and they decide what gets done with it.
But it is true what Joe's saying, just again projecting, because it's It's not going to happen this year. Even though we may have a healthy balance this year, we have to pay down that debt first. If we didn't, so let's say hypothetically, we're all paid off and we end up with a healthy balance. And you'll know that. We'll start doing end of the year projections either in April or definitely by May. So I would say that we're gonna project that we have $300,000 of carryover money. So we would then, well, in the best case scenario, you would wait till you get audited. You would have an audited balance forward, and then you use that. And this, what I'm talking about is you might project that you're going to have, say, $300,000 left over, and you're going to use 200 of that to put into a capital improvement account. And so everything being whole from a town school standpoint, then you say we say to the town, we're going to take 200,000 of that, and we're going to carry it. We're going to ask the voters to put that into a capital improvement account, and then we establish that and we keep adding to it. So we're not in a position to do that right now.
Yeah. Okay.
And if anybody thinks, I know you're not thinking this, Joe, because we've had this conversation, but if anybody thinks we're going to save money in the budget, enough money over a period of time to build a new school, that's not even remotely close. We're talking, a new school is going to cost this town easily $20 million, probably as much as double that. So we're never going to save that kind of money in that way.
Okay. Thank you.
It's complicated. I'm sorry. I don't mean to.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I just had I don't know if it's even a question, but more of a statement. You had to bring this to the town, right, in the budget?
Absolutely. They have to approve it.
You can show this year, what, was it 40 students are homeschooled?
Yeah, it's about 40.
How much money we lost?
Right.
With Winthrop such a declining population, you can show them, look what, we could add 40 kids to our school. Look what we can do to our budget. Look what we can add to affordable housing, all those types of things that Winthrop just doesn't have. And try to get that ball rolling in their heads. Look what we could do to schools. We just had 40, 50 more kids.
Yep. We anticipate, and I think I brought this up earlier in this discussion, not tonight, but that I anticipate at least half of those homeschool kids will come back next year because they're staying home. They chose homeschooling over remote. Didn't have any conversations with them. Don't know why they made that choice. But we're sort of hoping that we're going to get half those kids back. So the fact is, we can anticipate an increase in our subsidy next year. I guess that's all I really kind of wanted to say about that. But I was going to actually bring up a point that Joe asked me in an email, and it's being asked sort of everywhere, and it's related to a loss of students. I think there's a very scary correlation being made between we lose 40 kids. Why are we raising the budget? We should reduce the budget if we're losing 40 kids. And that would make some sense if we lost 40 kindergartners. But that's not what happened. We didn't lose 40 kids from any grade. We lost 40 kids spread over 12 grades. So the actual impact on any particular class is 1 or 2. So you're not going to reduce a teacher, you're not going to reduce staff based upon that type of reduction. And particularly in light of what you just asked him, where we can anticipate we're probably going to get, at least 20. I mean, I personally would like to get 40 kids back from homeschool next year. That'll be what we're trying to do.
Or just like that, just try to get them back, but get kids moving to them.
Yep.
And get the town to understand that what we could do in school if we just had 30, 40 more kids, and how can we get them to live here?
Yep.
And that's their domain, that's for them to figure out, but.
Well, it is their domain, but our domain is to continue to push to get back the reputation that Winthrop has always had about being a high-performing, successful school. And not to put any pressure on it, but that's basically what I told Megan her job is.
Thank you.
Not all by herself. She's got plenty of help with that, but.
Jolene will help.
Jolene will help. Correct. Yeah. So yeah, they would be better at it. They're probably more well received than some of the rest of us in terms of that conversation. So, please, more questions.
I have lots of questions about Article 1.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Starting on lines 1, 2, and 3. So, I remember from our last discussion that lines 2 and 3 were combined into line 1 for next year?
That's correct.
Okay. When I add the budgeted 7/1/2020 to 6/30/2021, I get 1.2 million, roughly, a little bit more. And the 7/2021 to 6/2022 is just like 1.16 million. But it's not reading in a way that makes sense to me.
Well, I don't have the calculator in front of me. When I looked at the, that really is a function of just putting all the staff that are actually in those and what the total salary is for those. So I can't, the numbers actually did make sense to me when I looked at it, because they, if you add those, if you add the five, if you go over to the far column for lines 2 and 3,
Yep.
the 512,000 reduction and the 549,000 reduction,
Mhm.
remember, those are the bigger groups of staff. Line 1 used to be just phys ed, art, and music. Maybe, I think that's it. So that's the smaller. So realistically, that increase is pretty minuscule. You're saying it's, I'm just doing it in my head right now, but it's,
I just added the 512 and the 549s that we were talking about over in the difference column.
yep,
It's 1062594.
right. And then you add the combined increases for all of the teachers, projected increases, you add that into line 1 with the 3 teachers that used to make up what's in line 1, and it equals the 1,165,169, excuse me, 93 cents. So I just know that's, when we plug those teachers in, it's done essentially by formula, but that's the process. And I don't want to make Mr. Ladd have to speak, but we asked him to look over the staff that were listed in that article to make sure they were all there. And they're all there, and that's what it cost us for them. The 1,165,000 is what it costs for them.
That's just less than the budgeted amount for all 3 of those lines for this year.
Jeff?
Hard for me to hear exactly the conversation, but I'm guessing you're talking about the K-5 and K-2 incremental costs.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand that. We always used to have a K-5 line, which was probably that line 1 you're talking about. But then we also had additional funding, which was called K-2 incremental. And we had to differentiate some supplies and staff, et cetera, that were specific for that K-2. What we've done is we've collapsed that into the K-5. And I'm not sure what version of the budget printout you're looking at right now, but Amanda is working to make sure, because I went over that with her, to make sure that all of the K-2 incremental funds were taken out of that section and moved in. Because when I looked at it, there were a couple that were still left. So she's in the process of double checking that section to make sure that those are properly listed.
Maybe I'm not explaining my concern.
I think if you add those 3 numbers up from last year, the budget we're in right now,
Mhm.
it equals 1.2035, right, 55846.
Right.
And the budget for next year is 1,165,000. So it's like $65,000 or $35,000 less.
38,388.53
Yep.
less.
Right.
Did we reduce teachers? Did we?
We had, yes, there were teachers who, we have, how many new many new teachers do you have on staff this year?
A whole bunch.
Yeah, that really is it.
So lost tenured teachers or newer teachers?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm not there every single day, but I'm thinking, as I'm walking through the building in my mind, I can think of at least 5, probably more like 10.
Okay.
Actually, it seems like upstairs, in the 4, 5, 6 wing, I think almost the entire upstairs are brand new people, right? Not all of them, but I mean, they're not ready to retire. They're not ready to retire either, right?
No.
So it depends on if you're talking about our one-year teachers also. I don't know if you're talking about contract or one-year teachers.
No, I'm talking about the people, not the COVID teachers, but the other people who are all,
So we have, I want to say 4 that are new, and then 4 that are second year and third year.
Okay. I was just concerned that the numbers weren't making sense to me, but that makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
We
you.
have 8 that are under like the 3-year probation right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. On line 6, substitutes, how come there's nothing budgeted for substitutes?
it's in a different place, and you'd have to ask me that, all right?
I did have that.
Line 8,
Yeah, line 8.
Okay, so there's just a duplication of,
Yeah, and we're trying to, I think I mentioned this before, the previous budget had lots and lots and lots and lots of lines with nothing in it. And between Amanda and myself, we tried to pare that down. And the reason, this might have been even less confusing for you all if we had just not included lines 2 and 3 and those types of lines. But trying to be as transparent with the historical data, that we have to kind of leave that in until that's no longer applicable.
lines 13, 14, and 15, which are about insurance benefits.
Yep,
Again, that's a situation where we're collapsing lines 14 and 15 into line 13.
correct.
Are teachers insured different rates based on the tenure of them?
No, no.
Okay, so,
They get different, they have a choice of what plan they choose, and we make those adjustments accordingly.
okay. So, the actual increase to that, it looks like it's increased just that line by 347, 243 and 99 cents, but the math looks like it's really actually only an increase about 44, almost 45,000. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Okay.
And then also remember that was slightly decreased from the last time you probably, well, actually, I don't know if you've actually seen the latest printout because of, we projected a 10% cost in insurance.
Okay. Okay.
And again, it's, I mean, not to go back to the same answer, but it is part of that. And this sometimes has a reverse effect. If you have veteran staff that are close to retirement, they're either going to be too adult. Sometimes they're adult with child. Rarely do they fit into, I didn't know we were having this conversation this week, that the people who are at the top or near the top of the scale generally have the lesser expensive insurance, full family being the most expensive. But so the people at the bottom are either feast or famine. If they're unmarried, they generally are single, which is it's the most affordable for us, or their family, which is the worst. So it's there's very few that are in the middle.
Right. Thank you. So lines 22, 23, and 24, they're called MSRS local.
Yeah.
What is that?
That's Main State Retirement contributions from the school.
is one a grade school, middle school, high school?
Nope, that's all still under, that's the same thing, we collapsed.
Oh, I'm looking,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
We collapsed all those
I
lines.
see that now too.
That's a, excuse me, correct in saying that we didn't used to pay that.
Well, I don't know, Joe, we've been paying it for a long time, so I think we always contributed. I think we contribute more than we used to.
Yeah, they put a lot more burden on towns to pay Main State Retirement in the past few years.
Yeah.
With that said, the actual change is down almost $2,000.
Again, it's very popular because it's based upon their
Seniority.
salary. So it's actually, all of that is actually correlating really nicely for me, so I'm glad you're asking these questions. You would expect if there's a reduced salary, you'd have a reduced MSRS contribution,
Okay.
which is weird. That actually should be changed, not that any of you care, but that's actually not MSRS anymore, it's now main PERS.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
same thing would be true for the unemployment lines and the workers' comp lines, that they were all collapsed.
Okay, so you say that on line 30, which is still on page 1 here,
Yep.
why is that workers' comp increased by almost double?
Well, that
By almost
includes,
3 times?
yeah, that's a good question. Well, it was supposed to be collapsed, but I don't see the numbers that were collapsed into it. They may have taken those out, so I'm just gonna put a question mark there. It makes no sense to me that there's no money in those other workers' comp lines, because those were broken out into those same thirds before, so I don't know why. My guess would be that the other lines that have zeros in them are not accurate,
Okay,
and that line is accurate.
okay, okay. These lines are so small, I brought my things. On the K to 5 equipment, why is it increased by more than double?
Mr.
On
Ladd,
line 42, page
yep, I got it. There was a specific request for equipment next year. Mr. Ladd, do you remember what that was?
For the proposed amount,
The equipment for K-5.
yes, that primarily the increase is to purchase new cafeteria tables.
Oh, yes.
In anticipation for being able to return back to cafeteria tables rather than individual desks.
And are they just new tables because the old ones need to be replaced?
Yeah.
You can check out what we have here, and we have a lot of others that are up in storage in the Carlton Mill,
Yep.
and I would prefer not to bring stuff that's on its last legs back.
Gotcha, okay, thank you. Lines 45 and 45 look like they were collapsed.
44 and 45, that's correct.
Okay.
That's middle school.
So I'm seeing a difference of just over 14,000. Is that what you would expect?
It is.
Okay. And then on line 54, which is teacher 6 to 8 insurance benefits, where did that budget go, that $89,000 reduction?
It went to the line above it. The line above it, and maybe in
Okay.
hindsight, we should have done that separately, but the line above it is is up by 101,000.
Okay.
And that's a collapse, that's both, they're the same thing, they're insurance benefits. The only difference between those two lines is, one was Allied Arts, which is the same grouping of people. So before we go any further, something for you guys to be thinking about as we go through this, because I don't know how thoroughly the town council is gonna go through this, but I think in our attempt to try to be transparent, it might actually be confusing. So I don't know if it makes sense to try to when we printed on the budget that we only have one where there used to be 3, and we only have whatever line, we only have one workers' comp line. I just think it's, my fear was kind of, and that last question is, it really makes the point, Kelly, in that, if you look at line 55, it's up 101,000, and that's gonna jump out at somebody like, oh my God.
Right.
If you combine that with the second one, that line, those two lines are up 12,000. That's not, that's not so hard to swallow. And my answer would be, look at those two lines combined, and that's where you get your actual increase. So whatever, we can think about that as we go through and have to think about presenting it to people other than us.
Okay, perfect, thank you. On page 3, line 67, unemployment, that reduced by 2/3?
Yep, it's possible. That is also based upon a formula that was collapsed, and it has to do with what you actually use, actual usage. So if you don't have a lot of unemployment cases, then your rates go down.
Okay. Oh, so like the point system with unemployment? Okay.
Something to that effect, yeah.
Okay. And then line 82, equipment, why is it down by nearly 2 times? So we're reducing $10,000 in that budget. Where did that go? I can't remember.
Mrs. Chris, are you on the line? There she is.
I am.
Can you?
I am.
Yeah, the question is on your equipment, reduced by $10,000.
Equipment at the middle school last year was for a new server and things that should have been in the technology. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. It was supposed to be in the technology line, so I believe that's been transferred over. I don't know, we'll have to talk to Mike.
No, that's
But that was a lot. And also in equipment, we had items such as smart boards and that kind of stuff, which actually Superintendent Connie took out of the year previously.
But thank you, Karen. That actually helps. This is why it's so important for us to have this conversation. I can make notes. You'll also see as you go through this and the high school, and we've already gone through the grade school, but one of the things that we did do this year, and it's going to show up in Article 5, is we tried to make all of the technology purchases district-wide. So we pulled a lot of technology equipment and technology type purchases out of primarily the middle school and the high school. So I just made myself a note so I remember that when I get asked that next time.
Okay. On page 5, lines 134 and 135, we collapsed the high school teacher salaries and high school allied art teacher salaries. Did they decrease because of seniority as well, or did we lose teachers?
Yeah, significantly. The high school probably even more so than the grade school. Middle school is fairly stable this year.
Yep.
But the grade school has a lot of new staff, and the high school has a lot of new staff.
Okay. On page 6, line 176, this is English language ed tech 3. Was that for English as a second language?
That was, it's ELL, right?
Okay, and where did that money go? Do we no longer need that position?
We no longer need that position, correct?
Because we don't have anyone, and we're not
Correct.
anticipating having anyone?
Not anticipating any.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on page 7, since we're right there?
Yep.
183 and 184. Was there a big switch in the alternative ed teacher and the ed tech situation?
The ed tech didn't return. We are still in hopes that we will be able to hire one. That's why an amount of money was put in there. The person who, the teacher that's part of her salary. It's a shared position.
Okay.
And so it's to get, essentially the ed tech was a full-time person, or we are anticipating it's a full-time person. And the, like I said, the teacher is shared.
I was just wondering why an ed tech was making more than a teacher, so that would explain it.
Well, that's really good ed tech. No, I'm just.
Yeah. Sign me up.
Very good.
It's true. It's true. Never met him, but I heard really awesome things. So.
I'm done. I only really had a chance to fine tune number one.
So what I'd like to do, I like this process of going through page by page. As much as you all, I think you come to know me, I love abstract random, scotching around. I know it drives people crazy, and it's actually better for me when you make me stay organized. So any other questions on Article 1 I would ask? So in the newest version of this budget, Article 1, at one point was showing a decrease, but what's also reflected in here was this was the article we missed a staff member. And so we had to add that staff member in. So that is now up 2.26%, but $101,000. But for me personally, I'm going to say this a number of times, but when you think about the conversation we've already had, and this is why this is so good to have this conversation. That's a lot of money, but I want to remind you all that next year we are in year 2 of the state's 3-year incremental raise. Next year we have to go from 35 to 37.5 for our minimum teacher pay. The year after that we have to go to 40,000. So to have those kinds of increases thrust upon us, and to keep that at that type of an increase is actually really, I think, really strong work.
I have a question. In
Yes.
regards to that, and I think you said this, but I just want to clarify that it doesn't just affect that bottom line salary, correct? You're going to have to refigure everybody's
So it worse. I mean,
from there?
the simplest way to think about it, and this is not correct, and obviously we're in negotiations, so we have to be a little bit careful what we say. But I don't remember. I'd have to look at the scale, but our year 2, year 3, year 4, I think are all still below 37.5. So if you were to just be overly simplistic and say steps 0, 1, 2, 3 are all going to be 37.5. That means teachers that have been here for 3 years make the same as teachers who are just starting. That's not, I think, acceptable in any scenario. So, and that's all we could do if we weren't going to negotiate different raises for different years' experience, because the state will only reimburse us for the staff who are being paid less than 37.5. And again, there may be people who say, well, that's fine. Let them, if they're going to give us money, let them give us money. They're only going to give us money to get to the minimum. And if we are truly interested in hiring people, being competitive in the area, and hiring people, if we just stay with the minimum, we're just going to continue to struggle with hiring staff here in our community. Again, without really speaking about negotiations, I think you've got 2 very good people supporting the board and have that recognition and are concerned about that issue and want to make sure that we start to be more competitive to keep our staff here.
And just 2 follow-up questions. So it looks to me like you've already factored all of that into this budget.
We factored a good portion of it in.
Okay.
But I would say that so this is again, remember, no, actually you never heard this, but at one point we had this budget down to about 32,000-ish. And Amanda and I were talking, and we realized that we had not put in an amount of money for negotiations. So we knew we had to put in some money for negotiations. So is it possible that Well, first of all, is it possible that we settle the salary scale before we have to approve the budget? Yeah, I think that's possible. And so let's just hypothetically say we do. Does that increase the budget? Does it decrease the budget? I don't know. I couldn't tell you that right now. So it is possible that number is going to change. But I think we feel very confident that the number we have in there is a solid number.
Second question, I didn't realize this until you just said this, but you said the state will reimburse for anybody that's under the 37.5?
They will bring us up, so right now, currently, our bottom line, our step 0 BS is 34.5. The state minimum this year is 35. So people that we have, that we hired at step 0 are getting paid 34.5 from us and 500 from the state. Well, the state's sending it to us. They're not getting paid by the state. They're sending it to us and we pay them.
And so, but the budget that you're factoring doesn't have that reimbursement factored in, so we could gain a little bit of extra revenue?
Well,
From the
we're getting,
reimbursement?
it's a little bit hard. I really can't talk about what's happening in negotiations. Just know that these guys are very aware of both what you just asked and that we have to, again, think about that in next year, not this budget, but in FY '23. So let's just say hypothetically, we don't go to at least the minimum, then we have to kind of do the same thing. Even harder to do that I think in year 2. So we're trying to close that gap.
So Sue, one of the things that we are keeping in mind when we're in negotiations is balancing that budget versus community atmosphere in the school and competition with area schools to get the best candidates to teach our students. So without talking too much, it would be detrimental to that thought to try to skirt under and only pay them.
Right. Well,
Maybe another way.
what I'm getting at more is that for example, it looks like we might need $310,000 to meet our budget. But we potentially might be getting some of that back through, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, you are, but that will, so.
I know it's a year out.
No, I'm not even saying that. I'm saying, so let's just say next year we don't go to the state minimum and we have that reimbursement. It now has weakened our position. It makes us less competitive to be able to hire these staff, and that's a big consideration for us.
I'll talk to you about it after.
It's a very serious situation because they just aren't producing the teachers. And they seem to be so hesitant about changing some of the qualifications of teachers. And one thing that has been looked at is how many people coming out of service who are retiring, who their primary job in service was to teach people, and can easily convert over into some of the STEM courses. But the state won't give them the full certification and makes them go back to school and everything else. And they've got to change their attitude. These people are qualified people. And so you're competing a little bit on that area too. What can we do with some of these people? But the state will only pay you really for 3 years, so it's not a long-term thing either. Because at the end of the 3rd year, they expect that you're at 40,000. Now, I can't see them holding it there. In fact, I think the proposal may inherently say that the cost of living increase will be raising that base automatically too. But that's one of my arguments to say this, they should be giving us more money. I mean, they're all excited they're going to be a little over 50% this year, 55% that the voters have approved twice. The other problem is I was speaking to the superintendent about this, and we have such problems with finding substitutes. You have to kind of look at saying, maybe one way of doing that is we're gonna have to hire one of these teachers full-time to be a robot. Maybe even 2 teachers. But the fact is that it's not just that the teacher is sick, but there are other responsibilities that teachers have. That means they gotta leave early, et cetera, and all the rest. And I don't know why we don't consider having some people around that could perhaps work in the afternoon while the coaches are off to do their things, and et cetera.
Interesting thought.
Other questions on Article 1?
No, thanks, so much better.
Article 2, as it stands right now, Article 2 is down 2%, 2.2%, almost $48,000. And I had explained in my memo to you that the primary source of that reduction is discontinuing or cutting 3 ed techs. And what I also warned you about was this is the second year in a row that we've cut ed techs. 2 of those positions remained vacant for the entire year, and 1 for a good portion of the year. And I can't disclose conversation that Mrs. Fawcett and I had today, but you know that's an ever-changing world. But something came up today that potentially is going to save us. But I will tell you, and Mrs. Fawcett can certainly jump in if she wants to, that even if we net some savings there, it probably won't. I'm not sure that we will be reflected in the budget. It will just make us. Somebody asked, actually, Tim, I think you asked a question about, and it's not about having a pot of money, you know, an in case type of thing, but this may be one of those. This budget is, particularly in the area of special ed, is pretty razor thin. So if some of the things we talk about today does come to fruition, it'll give us a little more breathing room. That's all I can say. Mrs. Fawcett, do you want to jump in on anything?
No, the only thing that I would just remind folks about, and I think we talked about it last week, is around when we reduce special education budget, we also have to consider maintenance of effort. And it's looking at a 3-year rolling average of what we spend for special ed students. And we have to maintain our effort in saying that we're spending locally as much as we were on average for students in the previous 3 years.
And when we don't, when we reduce or do not meet maintenance of effort, then it becomes a responsibility of the special ed director and myself to justify that why we make those cuts, and that it's not just arbitrary or whatever the case may be. We're still meeting the needs of all the students. Any other questions on special ed? Other instruction is Article 4, and again, nobody asked this again, and I guess I don't need to repeat myself, but we don't have an Article 3 because Article 3 is career and technical education, and that money goes directly to CATSI for our students. So other instruction is up. The percent seems pretty high, 5.85, but it's $22,800. That is primarily coaches and things related to our co-curricular, extracurricular offerings, stipends and such.
That's all based on salary too, right? Or no?
Yes and no. You're talking about
Years of experience?
Yep, that's a factor in it.
So that should increase every year if salaries are increasing every year.
Yeah, I think, but it's one of the things, again, we talk about negotiations, so it's hard to talk too much here, but we are, you know, I think, and I don't have my contract with me, but I think there's a cap. They get the experience factor for a number of years. 10 sticks out in my mind, but I wouldn't swear to it. But you're right, I mean, generally speaking, it's not like we have our entire coaching staff is 20 years or more experience.
Right.
But we've also got some additions too.
That's true, yeah, we do have some additions. Some of them, again, we can't talk about because they're being discussed in negotiations, but we have accounted for them.
Okay.
Any other questions, on Article 4? Article 5, student and staff support, is where you see the greatest, I shouldn't say the greatest, but that, from the, if you look between budgets, that had some real changes, major changes. It is now down $371.73, and in the budget before that, it was up like over $100,000. This is the budget, this is the area where we collect, the technology is, and so if you go all the way to the end of this, but I don't want to do that, but when we get there, this is where Mike is essentially collapsed, taking money from the buildings, put it into a district-wide budget. We have made some other, I did do some other paring down to get, looking at my own notes here, so. There are some other pieces, and I know that we talked about this a little bit during the coronavirus monies. Mike did a great job of purposing that money for technology purposes, but we still have quite a ways to go. And I shared with you last time, this is sort of a little tiny bit of hesitancy here. We made some cuts probably further than I wanted to because I'm trying to grow this line, because I think we have not, in the same way that Sue was just talking about, I'm sorry, Mrs. Foster was just talking about maintenance of effort for special ed. Well, there's not a maintenance of effort requirement for technology, but it's certainly, if you know when you're putting together that budget that there's going to be about a 4-year life on equipment, particularly teacher and student devices. Those are going to have to be replaced on a regular basis. So you should be able to get that line to a place where it's healthy and doesn't fluctuate year to year, to go up and down based upon what needs to be purchased. That we know equipment's going to wear out, we know we're going to have to replace it, so we should be planning an amount of money. So part of what happened here is we still try to do the thing that I like to do, and I think we can get away with it at least one more year of one-time monies, one-time purchases. But that's not really going to be totally true here, because those one-time purchases, like Mike invested a great deal of money in infrastructure this year, but that infrastructure is not forever. It's going to have to, now we're in a position where, we're probably in pretty decent shape for 2 or 3 or 4 years from an equipment standpoint. And we probably were hoping that the Biden money comes through, President Biden's money is coming through, and that we'll be able to, again, make some purchases that will allow us to keep the budget lower in future years. But we have to be careful. Remind you all that with all of these monies, they are intended to supplement, not supplant. Supplant means it takes the place of stuff that's supposed to be in your budget, needs to be in your budget. So that's what I meant when I said one-time purchases, one-time monies. So this is the area that's probably the most volatile, and also the place where we can probably target easily, because everybody is doing it with the federal stimulus money to do this. But over a period of time, we're going to have to increase these lines. We did pare them down a little bit. I will tell you that, in all fairness to Mike, I asked for more money in these lines than he did, because I was trying to reach that goal of getting to a place where it was pretty stable. But obviously as the budget, that was in the original budget, and as this has come to fruition, we just can't afford to do it.
I have a question.
Yep.
These sheets that we have now are the original, not the ones with the cuts that you made. Is there a way we could get the updated sheets so we can see what you cut?
Well, I just did those. I mean, I did $100,000 worth of cuts yesterday.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and Amanda just entered them this afternoon, so you will definitely be getting updated.
Great, thank you.
Budgets. That's why I brought you the updated today bottom line sheet.
I do have a question on page 1, line 2. Is that increase because the counselor is not included in other budgeting places, and that's just an annual increase?
Line 2?
Yep.
Yeah, that would be that per person's increase.
Okay, thanks.
And again, they're in that same bargaining unit, so if that's 100% accurate or not, I couldn't really say. Other questions? I didn't want to run through the whole thing, but all the thing I was just talking about basically in the last 2 pages, 11, 12 and 13, and I can tell you the major cuts that were made. Line 290. That was cut by $6,000 from 28,000 to 22,000. Line 291. And again, in all fairness to Mike, that he requested 22,000. I made it 28 because of what I just explained earlier. And then the technology equipment, that was 98,000. Was up by 95.6. That was a huge increase. We talked about that before. That's been cut back to 60,000. It's been cut back to 60, so it's a savings of 38,000. Again, of that, a little bit of that is, I think I bumped it up by 20,000, trying to get to that. That's a line we definitely need to get up and keep up. But we also took a look at some equipment that we will be able to purchase through ESSER funds. The other thing that's in this line, I'm sorry, I should have said it earlier, is you voted for a second computer technology person. That person is not reflected in this budget. That is, Megan has just completed the ESSER 2 application, and money for the second computer technician is in that grant. Hopefully you'll be so excited about the work and you know how that works. Next year we'll put together a budget. It'll be in the budget. You'll support it. You laugh. Okay, the next line, line 293, is hardware supplies. Again, this is sort of the same, feels like the same story. That was inflated by about 10, I hate to use the word inflated. That was probably $10,000 beyond what Mike had originally requested. Again, I think it's a line that needs to be, we need to get to a healthier position eventually. So we cut $20,000 out of there. So quickly you can go through, there's $64,000 between those 3 lines that was cut from this budget and there. Any other questions on student and staff support? Okay, Article 6, Board of Education is, I've told Amanda we need to make sure she's gone through the process. Hopefully in your next one you'll see that you are not the Board of Education, you are the school committee. And all those lines will reflect that. That line, Article 6 is actually down $6,143. No, that's not right. I need to come, borrow you ruler. No, I'm just kidding, Yeah, Article 6, System Administration is down $6,258. So I honestly can't tell you off the top of my head. That basically includes, oh, I know why. I think I shared with you before that we're looking at sharing a position with the town for business manager services. And initially we put in $30,000 for that position, and that was cut by $15,000. There wasn't much of an increase in this line anyway, but that was over by a little bit, and we cut $15,000 out of it, and it's now down. I just told you 6,000.
Is that business manager, is that a new position or is that what you managed?
It'll be new for us.
Okay.
This board voted last year, was a position we didn't fill. There was a, what'd you guys call it? Bookkeeper position. And ultimately, I'm really glad that that didn't happen. We, Amanda and Ida and Colleen are excellent at sort of everything they need to do around that. I think another person with essentially that same skill set probably isn't what we need. We need somebody with a different type of skill set that will do things that a business manager typically does and have that level of expertise. So
will this position impact those three positions at all?
no,
Okay.
not for the next year. I've already said this to her, so I don't mind saying it publicly, but the intent is that when we're developing the FY23 budget, that we will not have the accounts payable role in the central office. But you'll have to grapple with that next year. I will say that this is a person who's already, we'll have to talk about that when this budget is approved. We have to create that position. Actually, I don't even know. We have to talk about the process because it is a person that sort of is earmarked for it, is already employed by the town. And we are already sort of moving in the direction of providing the training and the information available to learn the school side. So that'll be an interesting question. I don't really know how we go about approving that type of shared position. I will say this, I don't mean to make a political statement, but I'm actually very, very happy. I know this town has endured a number of years of where the sides, I guess for lack of a better term, don't necessarily work that well together. And I think that the only people who lose in that situation are the taxpayers. I think we're in a situation now where the relationship between the school and the town is healthy, and certainly my intent to keep it healthy. Any other questions or any questions on the school committee central office?
I do. On page 3, line 51, which is business office salaries,
Yes.
what's that reduction reflecting?
That's exactly what I was just talking about. We reduced it by $15,000.
Okay.
And it's also, I'm sorry, also there was the money was put in the budget last year for the bookkeeper, it just never happened. So that was the approved budget from last year, that was in there. So it's a combination of all of those things.
Okay.
Because you can see that if you go back 2 years, you can see there was an increase of $29,000. And then that included that position.
Okay. And we're not funding for the business office audit next year?
We are. Yeah, again, that's one of those, I have to figure out how to do it. It is in where? It's somewhere
I
else.
think it's number 9, line 19.
It is line 19. Yep, line 19 is the money for the audit.
That's fine. Thank you.
I have a question in regards to that. Is that something that we pay for every year?
Yes.
How does that work with the town? Are they separate audits, or do they pay for theirs, we pay for ours? How does that work?
They hire the auditor, and we pay our portion of it.
Okay.
Which, if you think about that, I mean, it's been, but you can see 2 years ago, it was $20,550 for the auditor. This year we're budgeting $10,900. So we've done well. And for my money, again, probably should keep these comments to myself, but I'm very happy with the audit. I'm not happy that they've taken so long to get our audit to us, but Runyon Kirsten Willett is an outstanding auditing firm, and I'm very happy we have them.
We don't know when that's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's imminent. It could be next meeting, it could be the meeting after that, because it's the management, I told you last time, but I replied to the management letter. I saw that John Woodson is required to respond as well. The attorneys that work with us, and they've responded as well, so I can't think of anything else that's needed. I think they have everything, so it's just a matter of getting the report done. And I've had several correspondence with Jennifer,
On line 66, is the reduction of postage because we're doing more things electronically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, on to Article 7. Article 7 is school administration, and school administration is exactly as the line, speaks to. It's the principals and the assistant principals, athletic director, and those people are all in school administration. It is currently up by 4%, and there were, and that may come down a little bit, but it's primarily negotiations and the product of that. And you go through, look at every building and see, what the increases are. And, don't be fooled, especially because they're both sitting here in the office. If you look at grade school, let me make sure I double check myself before I say that. Yeah. That's a function of the negotiations. I was thinking it was a combined principal, assistant principal, but they each have their own line. Full-time job, Gina.
That's why they sit me over here.
On page 2, line 25, grade school conferences, what is that $1,000 for?
That is to pay for staff to go, I'm sorry, not staff, that pays for the administration to go to conferences.
Oh.
I would say that was, I don't believe that number was requested by Jeff. If you look through each of the grade school, middle school, and the high school, I really, particularly the grade school, with new administration potentially coming in there next year, middle school with definitely having a new administration next year, I want to make sure that we have funds available to have our administrators participate in conferences.
Great, thank you.
I probably should have told you all before, not that, because it's not like some big secret, but if you look at the coding, the only, well, actually, the way Amanda does this, it doesn't make any difference. At the end of each line, it says MS for middle school and GS for grade school, but the code before the 030 is middle school, 020 is grade school, 040 is the high school. I'm sorry, 300 is the high school. Any other school administration questions? Article 8 is down significantly, and I explained to you before. We are in year 2 of the bus sale reduction. So I think we'll benefit from that reduction for another year. And then was it? Now I have to look. I'm second guessing myself. I was thinking it was 3 years, it might be 4. But whatever, eventually, we're not actually receiving any money from Northeast Charters for giving them our buses. We are actually just getting a reduction in the cost of the contract. So we figured out the value of the buses, divided it by a number of 3 or 4, and that's what they've reduced from their contract every year until the buses are paid off. And probably very helpful for us this year. Any questions on that? Article 9 is also some pretty dramatic changes. One of them was a an error on my part, which is why I'm glad we just go through this over and over and over again. I can't even begin to tell you where I came up with the numbers, but I had the numbers really off for the contract for FMS, our cleaning services. And off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure, and I think I put it in the information I sent to you, that when I double checked those numbers with FMS, because they just didn't seem right, then the owner, Patrick Dillon, got back to me and said, no, here's what the numbers are. And then I plugged those in, and it saved us about $52,000. So it was a huge savings there. So that's the big savings in Article 9. In addition, I had shared with you before that Mr. Ladd had requested money for siding for the grade school. It really does, well, actually initially we talked about replacing the board and batten, and I think we settled on siding, but it's not done. But anyway, I budgeted about $50,000 in here on line 48 for that project, and we have subsequently cut $50,000 from there, so that's now going to show an increase of $12,000, not $62,000. And we'll take the money for the siding out of the ESSER funds. There are 2 or 3 major capital improvement projects that we intend to get through. Megan had included in the ESSER 2 funds. The roof at the high school, the roof at the grade school, or portions of the roof at the grade school, and siding are the 3 major projects on the that we're getting out of ESSER funds. So that's why that was reduced from this budget. So that takes Article 9 to just an increase of $41,000. But again, I'm going to give you the same warning here, and you're going to get sick of hearing this from me over the years. But we are not funding our capital improvement areas very well at all. And it will come back to bite this community long after I will have ridden off into the sunset. Just kidding. But definitely, one of the things that the state will look at once you make application for a new building is, have you invested money have you invested an appropriate amount of money in your buildings and in upkeep of the buildings? And if the answer is no, it will knock your rating down on your scale. The state has been very on your score, I should say. The state has been very clear. They will not allow school systems to just let the buildings fall down around them, and then they come in and fix them all up. They've been very consistent for as long as I've been involved with them that they won't do that. So that whole concept of maintenance of effort is true for this line as well. And from my perspective, I don't know what the total amount of our buildings is worth, but I'm going to guarantee it's way more than $1 million. And so for us to invest $1.3 million into our facilities, it's not a great investment. I mean, it is a great investment, but it's not enough of an investment. So we'll have to, as we get more involved, if I ever have a report for that committee, I will hopefully will be able to start giving you more specific information about what that line should look like.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Page 1, line 20, which is heating fuel for the high school. It's increased by $13,000.
Yep.
But at the elementary school and the middle school, there was a reduction.
Yeah, I flagged the same thing.
Okay.
It's just that the usages are different. And that does sort of raise another point, but related to this line, that sometime next year, maybe even this spring, although I don't see it happening, we need to do an energy audit. So they may be able to come in and tell us why the high school is so inefficient, and the grade school in particular. You would think if there was going to be an inefficient building, it would be the grade school. But those numbers are based upon the usage that we receive from the custodians in those buildings, and then we have locked into a rate for fuel, so it's really based upon actual usage. And I'm glad somebody else picked that up, because I did too. It's like, it just doesn't seem correct.
I did too, and it made me wonder, I've noticed some of the windows are open at the high school, and they have been all winter, and I didn't know if that could have been contributing to that.
It didn't help, I can promise you that. This is based upon more than just that, and one of the things that we were kind of telling them to do is, to the extent it was tolerable, to have the windows open, but I don't believe that's a direct reflection. Anything else on Article 9?
Why are we needing propane at the high school that we weren't needing before?
That's a great question. Megan, do you happen to know that? Or Tiff, do you know why we need propane at the high school we didn't before? I should know that answer, Kelly, so I will, what line is that again?
That is line 19.
I'm gonna throw this out there, not knowing, but assuming maybe. I'm wondering if it has to do with, our maintenance building, is supposed to be getting heat in there. I don't know if it's a propane-based system, or even being able to run certain machinery out of there possibly, because I know that just got hooked up with electricity last year, or last budget season, I believe.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if maybe that might be why.
That's my guess.
Yeah, thank you, good question. I will definitely get an answer for that. Okay, we ready to move on? Next two, if you have questions, probably not anything we can do anything about. Debt service amount is prescribed through the ED 279. That's, the funding formula thing. It tells us as we have debt, they're paying the debt, they have to send us the money. Honestly, we never receive the money. It's a paper exchange. They tell us how much is principal, how much is interest, and that's what we have to put in our budget.
And that comes from the state or from the town?
From the state. Yep. And that right now, the only debt service project we still have going is the high school. And I'm guessing, and I gotta stop guessing on this one, I think it's a 25-year note, and we're in year 20 of it. Colleen, can you make a note let's double check on that? I'm only saying that because it's I always thought it was a 20-year note, but if you look at what the balance is, it's certainly going beyond 20, and I don't think it's gonna go to 30, but who knows? And then Article 11 is set all other expenditures, and there was a question last time looking at what was expended, and the answer, we talked to Chief Frost, and it is for the crosswalk guard, and they are projecting, they basically said 6,000 was the right number. The reason it wasn't more than 3,560 last year is because we didn't have any crossing guards from March until the end of the school year, because we had to go to school. And this year we added 6,000, and he's telling us we should put 6,000 for next year. So that's all we have for other expenditures. Okay, let's go on to, if you'd like, we'll go on to, now I have these in front of me here, can't get off my computer. Adult Ed, met with Josh, and Josh is online, yep, there he is. He is online and can answer any questions that you have, but basically, made some structures, some changes in,
Do we have this in our packet?
you just have the summary.
Oh, just that, okay, I didn't know if okay,
You'll have it in your new packet.
thank you.
But essentially, there was a loss of about $5,000 in subsidy, I'm sorry, $1,000 in subsidy, and, no, I'm sorry, $5,000 in subsidy. And the budget is decreased by about 4,000. That's why you can see on this sheet here, we're asking for $1,000 more from the town to support Adult Ed. And as I said, Josh is on, and run through that real quick, Josh? Maybe? There he is.
Yeah, just bringing my budget up real quick. So, yeah, the most significant changes in the budget relate to having our admin assistant working full-time, me working one day, which I'm already doing. That was a change we made last year, so it's reflected in this year's budget. We have a slight decrease in our instructor salaries because I anticipate we'll probably come in under this year, and so that's been reduced. And the grant monies, which are in the budget, may end up actually being more, but the hard part about those grants is that we really don't know solidly how the money's going to fall because we are part of a hub of adult ed offices, and those usually get resolved somewhere in May and June as to how we're going to allocate for the upcoming year, because we have to do that together. So, but all in all, the budget is pretty flat, and just wanted that extra $1,000 to make up for what we couldn't cover in the loss of subsidy. And just as a side, the subsidy in adult ed works on reimbursement from 2 years ago. If we underspend, if we don't spend, then we end up losing a little bit of subsidy, and they have changed the formula at the state level, so I don't know exactly how it works, but we have there are other, we basically have 60 plus sites across the state that compete for an amount of funding that is pretty much at the same level for the last several years. So sometimes when somebody gets bigger, other people lose a little bit of money. So that's where we are.
I have a question for you.
Okay, can we just,
Yeah.
just on the chat, it's saying that we need the school committee members to speak up a little more?
Okay, thank you. Josh, this is Kelly. You said that there is an instructor salary decrease. Is that because we're offering fewer courses, or is there another reason for that?
No, this year we're going to probably come in having done fewer hours as we did last year, and so it just reflects that we actually have about the same number of students, and we're offering about the same number of classes, but it's I think, this is my 3rd year. I think I was hopeful that we would be using that, and so I'm adjusting the salaries appropriately. And they're not really set. I mean, all of our instructors are part-time instructors. We have one that is not working with us right now, and we've been able to kind of work with the other 2 that we do. There are the 3 that are still working with us. So we have been able to work with those 3 to cover all our bases with students. So we haven't seen a decrease in students, and we're at about the same as we were last year and at this time. So I'm just anticipating it's going to be about the same hours.
Thank you.
Other questions for Josh? Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right?
They'll have more questions for you later. Later meetings. Okay, at school nutrition, again, you'll get the full school nutrition in your next packet. First of all, I have to just say, and Erin's on, so she can certainly speak to this, but I just want to say, and I don't want to even say her defense, but this has been a real challenge because we don't know, and probably won't know, that there's discussion about that food service will be the same next year, that'll be free for everybody, breakfast and lunch. Maybe not, so it's really, really challenging to try to figure out revenues. It's try to figure out a lot of those things, but making her best shot, and Richie and I sat down and went through this together. That budget is looking at being reduced by $31,471.09. But we're really reluctant to make a lot of changes because of all the uncertainty. We both felt comfortably that we could ask the voters for $5,000, if it's a $31,000 reduction based upon best ability to project, then we felt we could ask the taxpayers for $5,000 less. So between adult ed and school nutrition programs, the reduction to the taxpayers is about $4,000. So I don't know, what kind of, Aaron, can you give some sort of overview? I know there were some changes in personnel. If you want to talk about any of that stuff.
I have mostly moved money out of food purchases into personnel because of the salaries that increase every year as a result of the contract. And also we have one employee, a manager, who was cut from, her position was cut from a lead position back to a manager position a couple years ago. And she has still been doing the job of the lead person, and we feel that it's just to put her back in that lead position. She's been extremely valuable to me as a new person in the district, and been there for over 20 years, really doing everything she can to keep things running smoothly. So I just felt it was important to put her back to where she was. I'm not really sure the reason why she was cut, but anyway, I've also been cutting from last year to this year. I cut food, and I'm cutting it again from this year to next year, mostly because no one was keeping an eye on food expenses. The most inexpensive products were not being bought when they could be, and there was not a good utilization of what the state provides us, or the government, USDA provides us free. A lot of the food that was being provided was being left in the freezer, and we've got that taken care of, and I just don't anticipate needing so much money for food as was originally budgeted. So I don't know if that is clear to everyone.
And we spent a lot of time talking about that when we were going through it, because I think, again, I keep saying about all the uncertainty, but there was certainly a history of, I'm not even sure what the right word is, but I think with food, the food market, purchasing market is so volatile that you really do need to pay attention. You need somebody who's really paying attention to where we can buy food and save money and whatever. And I think Aaron has done a very good job with that. Come on, you guys, you can't let her off the bed easy.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank
All right.
you, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
So, next meeting, you'll have a new, and we'll try to get that to you obviously in advance of that. You'll have an updated budget, and we'll kind of figure out where you want to go. April 5th, or maybe it's the 12th, is the meeting that we're supposed to do with the town. So ideally, I don't think we're, maybe feel differently. We need to vote on a budget at some point. I don't know how close you guys are feeling that we are to doing that. I feel like we need another meeting, and then meeting after that is a workshop. Those are, again, only 1 week apart. The 17th and the 24th, is that correct? Yep. And so what I'd like to shoot for is that we plan to vote, if we do the 24th, nothing but budget, that we plan on voting on the 24th for the budget. That's what I'd like to see.
Okay.
I guess I'd also just like to, I know this process has been a little bit different, well, certainly different for Tim and Kelly, but, you know, this has been quite a process, and I feel like there's been a lot of people involved in doing this, but what is your sense, this would be, I should have asked this before, I'd like to know what the school committee's sense is of what's a fair thing to ask from the community. I started this process by saying they can't realistically expect us to get to zero because there's no such thing as a zero budget. That zero budget means that you have found other ways to save and that it's really a decrease, I mean a significant decrease, no such thing as zero. So I said that, and then here we are with a negative budget, which I actually feel pretty good about. So I will say I'm very concerned about going any further with the cuts. A couple of you, Sue asked me a question before, and I think Joe asked me a question this afternoon. You know, are there still some other places? Well, yes, there are, but there are still some balls in the air. Insurance is still a ball that's in the air. Some of the other, some other issues around insurance is in the air. And now I can't think of what we talked about earlier, but we don't. But whatever, I just think, a really huge issue that I wanted to just bring to your attention, but I don't think, you know, depending on some of those balls that are still in the air, we got notification from Maine School Management that our property and casualty insurance is going to go up between 18 and 24%. We spend about $45,000 in property and casualty insurance for the district. So if you think about, you know, that going up by a quarter, that's going to be over $12,000. I didn't kind of lose my mind when I first saw that. I mean, kind of in my head I did, but I didn't really, because two things. I need to know what the number is. I mean, obviously 18 to 24% is alarming. But if it was 18 to 20% of 24% of $500,000, we have a major crisis. It's still an issue with 40,000 or 45,000, but it's not the same. And my sense is there's a few other places where we can consider some further reductions at this point, but we also can justify leaving them in there. And particularly the one I'm still pointing to is, even though we cut 2% on the insurance, I have my fingers crossed that will come in at less than 8%. And if that happens, I would probably suggest to you not to cut any more money out of the insurance line. Actually, what I'm going to ask you to do once things have solidified, and it's the only time I can do this, is I would look at the bottom line and I'll just move money around to the lines where they belong, make those lines accurate, and probably not consider much in terms of cuts. That's my recommendation. If you guys think there's no way in the world the community is going to support making up for the losses, because that's all we're asking them to do. We're not asking for an increase in the budget. We're asking them to make up for the losses. Then that's your call, and you have to direct us to do something different. Joe?
Tell me the relationship that Maine School Management has with their property and casualty insurance company. Are they an owner of that?
They own it. So one of the things that came up, it's a great question, and actually Pauline had the best reaction when I first got that news. I think this is only our second year with Maine School Management, or with Maine School Management for property and casualty. Prior to that, you used Kai's. Kai's Insurance has an outstanding reputation. I don't know what went into the decision to go away from Kai's to go to Maine School Management, but you know, one of the things we can consider, but I don't know. Timing is a little bit weird. We could go out and ask for them to bid on it again. But I'd have to look further into what the deal is. Are we under a contract with Maine School Management for X number of years? Can we go out and I think we are in a contract with them, because it would make no sense that you could change insurance companies from year to year to year. would make no sense. And I know from my previous roles as superintendent that we did not bid property and casualty insurance every year. So, Polly, maybe we could make note that's something we want to make sure to take a look at, where we are with
I'd like to see,
contract.
is Cross into that? Into that?
They were well not bid cross ones. They were what? Cross insurance, is that what you're asking? Yeah, when we went out for bid last year, they bid.
Well,
Guys did and so did they bid.
we know that nationwide, with all the various climate changes and everything, there's been certain costs that they weren't expecting. But I'll tell you, what really bothers me is main school management, I don't think is big enough in terms of where we have to go. And I wish the state legislature would look into it, because this is the type of cost which just really, well, any school district just can't absorb this thing like that.
Well, and if you think about it on a bigger scale, we're a small district, and it costs us $45,000. You know, what is it costing Portland or Lewiston or Bangor, Augusta, who have a great deal more property that has to be insured? So, it's a good question. But I guess my point in all of that is, I still look at some of the areas that I think are kind of soft in developing this budget, that I would not see us needing to necessarily come back with and ask for increases to this budget. And so the real question is whether or not we think we've gone as far as we can go. I personally think we have, but that's just me.
And also, I asked you to consult with the town manager. See, I don't know why we don't, not just one policy, not two policies. And that's really what it comes down to, particularly the size that we are.
Anybody care to comment on where the budget is at now and what you might look for us to do? The work that's been done thus far?
I think, it looks like it's shaping up well. I think once we get the cleaner coffee and all of that, and then, yeah, I don't have any big concerns. I don't think that's a very large increase to ask the town for, in spite of everything that's going on. So, yeah, I feel it's pretty well vetted, of course, because, with your meetings with admin, that's really who drives the budget, in my opinion, so.
I would agree with it. I think it would be useful when you go to talk to the town to know that information about how many taxpayers there are and what this increase would look like per family. Just to kind of put that into perspective, because it sounds like a lot, but when you break that down by family, what is that actual?
So,
and I understand mill rate gets involved in that as well, but.
So that's a great, let me sort of chuckling under my mask, I don't know if you can see that, but because one of the differences, being here in a single municipality as opposed to the SADs and RSUs I've been in, is one of my duties as the superintendent is to look at what the fiscal impact is on each of the taxpayers. So like when I was in RSU 4, I see what it was going to be for Litchfield, Sabattis, and Wales separately, because they're not all the same. They certainly don't share the same bill rate. They don't have the same valuation. They don't have any of that stuff. So I asked early in this process, because I wanted to share that information with you guys, what the impact was going to be, and I was basically told that we don't do that, that the town does that. So I'll go back and say, okay, I was asked, and I wish I could answer because, I had gone through that whole process of taking a look at, and I always had to put out documents every year about what the impact would be on a $100,000 home. And then, for a couple of years we did like 100,000, 250, and then it's like, well, we're only going to do it 100,000 because if you want a $500,000 home, multiply times 5. You can do the math yourself. I don't need to do that for you. But I haven't. I've been told I don't do that. So I'm kind of curious myself. I will definitely I do want to know. And I think it would be great information to share with you. If you know that it's going to cost, 10 or on a $100,000 home, and you can do your own, you know, version of that, then, you know, and then, again, that was information I provided. If your taxes will go up this amount based upon school increases, which translates to, you know, X dollars a month or whatever, you know. I don't have access to that information, at least not yet.
And I did have one question, just looking over this cover sheet. You told us before that there's no Article 3 because that money automatically goes to CATSI, but what would Article 13 have been?
You know what, I don't know that. I noticed that after, that it might be that whoever put this together is superstitious and there's no 13th floor, and there's no 13th, I don't know the answer, honestly, but.
Okay.
I did wonder that, though. I never looked into it.
Okay.
I've never seen that.
It's not something that's gonna have to be added in later. I
No,
guess.
no.
Okay.
No, these are all the things you need to consider from a budgetary standpoint.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And again, if you think of other questions, please add. The more you ask me, the more notes I can put in my document, the better prepared I will be. And by the way, whenever that meeting is with the town, my understanding is, if it's not my understanding is wrong, I'd like it to be right. Because it would be nice if all of you were there I can do the presentation, but it would be good if you were all there to support the budget. Except for Joe.
That's back up there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the following policies for second reading. BBAB, school board self-evaluation. BCC nepotism, BE school committee meetings, BEDB agenda, BEDBR agenda format, DJ bidding purchasing requirements, DJH purchasing and contracting procurement staff code of conduct, FF naming an area within a school or on school property, FFA memorial, FFE naming an area within a school or on school property checklist, IHBAA, referral and general education interventions, IHBAAR, referral procedures and general education interventions, IHBAC, child fines, JFAB, admission of non-resident students, JKAA, use of physical restraint and seclusion, JKAAR, physical restraint and seclusion administrative procedure.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion.
So one of the questions that was brought up, I think you asked Tim and Sue's prepared to answer it, but there was a question about transport versus
And escort.
Escort, yeah. So Mrs. Fossick, can you chime in?
So the Capital Area Regional Directors met with Eric Herlin, the attorney with John Woodson, last Friday. We specifically asked the question about the term escort versus transport and making those changes in policy. And he strongly advised against making those changes only because the language that is still in statute or regulation through the DOE is the word escort. Until that time that it changes, he would not encourage us to do that. The word transport, what he said was it sounds like it's something out of safety care language, which is the physical mismanagement program that we use in Winthrop. But having the conversation about what is transport versus escort and having the same definition may be a little risky. So he just advised us not to.
Do you use transport in the incident management reports or escort with safety care?
Jim, I can't hear that question.
Did you on the incident management reports under safety care, do you use escort or transport?
So I can't answer that 100% only because we have not utilized those procedures yet this year. So we haven't had the need to either determine if it was an escort or a transport. We typically use safety care language. In my previous district, we use safety care language.
Okay, thank you.
And Tim, just to respond a little bit further with that, part of the reason that we use the safety care language is because where we're trained in safety care, and that's our approved program, safety care will support our use as long as we can document that we've used their procedures correctly.
Okay, thank you.
So included in your packet, we already get a vote, is this on the floor, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So included in your packet is an updated memo about the changes. And what I really wanted to point out was I want to make sure we take the time for people to ask any other questions, particularly for the last 5 on the list, because we didn't really cover it in the first reading. You've had it, and you had the opportunity to ask questions about it for over a month. But I also recognize, and I would say that your committee chair and vice chair also recognize that this was a big thing to ask you guys to consider all these policies at once, and we're going to try not to make this happen again. But it's like, Colleen's laughing because like every day we get, the main school management asked us they gave us like 5 or 6 policies to look at. I got a policy, we hired a new, the regional service center is in the process of hiring a person to help coordinate services between the 3 districts that are part of that service center. She gave me 1 policy, the procedure that goes with it, and then there's 4 exhibits that go with it, all around bullying and such, and said that our policy is JICK, was last reviewed in 2017, and there have been some pretty significant changes. So my point is, we're trying to keep fewer policies from coming, if you guys could deal with 6 or 7, that's probably a lot, maybe as many as 10, depending on how substantive the changes are. But this is asking a lot, and I think we recognize that.
I've got a question, yes. First of
Just
all,
have to speak up for the owl.
First of all, this is quite a job, and I'm really pleased with some of the changes that have taken place, the way this has been presented. Under, however, educational policies, BEDB, which is the agenda policy. And my question is that you've taken care of regular meetings, you've taken care of what I would call special meetings, but there's also a 3rd type of meeting. Emergency. And I really think you need to put something in there that basically explains that. I thought it used to be that 2 or 3 members of the committee would call for an emergency meeting. And basically, it was just an immediate call for it. You didn't really have to, you could put it that time on the website or whatever you wanted to do. But it would not be impossible to have an emergency meeting within minutes, hours, a day of the particular cause. And I just think that might be important with everything going on in this world, that sometimes emergency meetings are good.
I feel like I've seen language with like emergency meeting before too, but obviously it's not in this, but.
I think the last time I saw it was from the town. When they had the folding room.
When a town holds an emergency meeting, maybe.
Which policy are you looking at?
BEDB.
It's on page 12.
Right, so that's for the agenda?
Yes.
Because if you look at policy BE, it does mention emergency meetings.
And that's where I've seen it from.
That's the school committee meeting
Oh,
policy.
emergency, yeah, 24 hours, whenever practical.
But Joe's right, I mean, from my own experience, we actually had I could share this because it's, I won't necessarily need to say where, and I don't think it makes any difference, but one of the things that's really weird in an SAD is once the board approves in their case it's the board, approves the budget, the warrant has to go, or the approved vote has to go to the town selectmen who have to sign it. And in that case, the selectmen did not want to sign it, and they refused to sign it, and so we actually had to have a meeting that was called for the next day, in which the town attorney, our attorney had to call the town's attorney, and the town's attorney had to tell the selectmen, you have no choice, but the circumstances are not really that relevant, but I think it is there, Joe, I think that it does explain it.
Well, it is under emergency meetings, but the point I made was, this is somewhat confining in that it says the chairman of the superintendent.
Yeah, I don't see, but I'm not familiar, nor do I recall ever seeing that I think the only ones who can call a meeting is me and the chair.
Are we talking about calling a meeting or disseminating an agenda?
No, actually, I was reading it under agenda because agenda seemed to be a confining thing. You had to have an agenda, you had to have it published and everything else, okay? I didn't remember reading the emergency meetings here. I remember reading it somewhere else. But this statement to me still doesn't go far enough because it limits to just you two as being able to call that emergency meeting. And so I don't trust you. You could be down at the Clearwater Beach, okay, the last time I saw you. And, you know, you weren't here, so. I wouldn't let Jim call.
Well, that is really the desire of the school committee. I've not ever seen that language, that school committee emergency meetings have only been called by the chair, either or me. And as it says, an emergency meeting may be called by the chair or at the request of the superintendent. So that's kind of what the language I'm familiar with. And that's not a change. And you can see policy BE was not changed. And what's the next one? BE.
If I had my way, I'd like to see it really way broader. And so that
You would like to see it say any school committee member?
I think two school committee members would be appropriate.
I'm confused which policy we're talking about. Are we talking about BE or BEDB?
Well, now that you brought it up, we could put it all in BE.
I would tend to, if you want to change that language, that's something I think would need to be looked at further if it's even, like, because I feel like it should be either the chair or the superintendent who would call the meeting. Unless, I don't even know why, but I just, to have any member be able to call a meeting, I would feel like that would have to, first of all, be
That's
legal.
why I said two.
Yeah, but even still, I would feel that would have to be, like, just to double check and make sure that's legal to do.
Well, before we double check it, because I had the same exact thought. I guess the real question is, Joe certainly would like to see that added, but that's Joe's one vote. See how the rest of you feel about.
Are you just concerned about incapacitation on both of their parts?
What I'm really getting back to is just this whole thing about the emergency. And I can envision that we might have to do something in a very hurried manner. And so I don't even know if you get the full board and the committee. I mean, what's the idea? It's a decision that we have to reach. And I think we need to just protect ourselves by having something like this. Because we could be accused of not having any action. It's not our fault. Because the superintendent's not here, disabled, the chair's away. What do we do?
Well, I think your hands are tied by the fact you cannot have a meeting without me. So if I am in Clearwater, but actually, unless, right now with COVID restrictions, I do not have to personally be here. I can zoom in, that's permissible right now, but who knows when that'll change, and if that does change, it goes back to what it was before, which is, you can't meet without me.
I just don't really anticipate that ever happening, I guess, in my view, that we could reach out to whoever the chair would be to call an emergency meeting. I mean, what do you do? Just determine we're having a meeting, determine we're having a meeting?
So, yeah, so you call in, and you have to call, and it is easier with, I mean, a 5-member board. When I had to call before, it was a 13-member board. That was a little more challenging. But in this case, if hypothetically Sue were not available, then you have your vice chair.
Right. And so the vice chair steps into that chair position, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
I feel it's fine as written.
The likelihood of all three of those positions being incapacitated or unavailable is relatively slim, I would think.
Well, the problem is the requirement to have the superintendent.
Say it again?
If there is the requirement to have the superintendent there in order to have an official meeting, actually changes my whole
Perspective.
reason for doing it, because I never even considered that fact. Because I do know there could be issues involving the superintendent or the superintendent's incapacitated that we needed to have.
Yeah, in that case, for instance, when I traveled out of the country, I have to appoint somebody duly certified to cover in my place, and I have to report that to the school committee.
And so
So
that
if I'm-
person would come to the meeting acting in your behalf? if
Correct.
needed? Okay.
Correct. And I did it when I was in Rumford. I sat in as the superintendent for the Bethel school system because their superintendent was abroad.
If we go back to your initial thought on BEDB, in that second paragraph, you have information about the regular agendas and about the special meeting agendas for how long they need to be posted, but you don't have anything about the emergency meetings. Now, that information is also here in BE, so should that information be replicated here in BEDB?
My question would be, would there be time to generate an agenda in an emergency?
Right, no, but in BE, right, it says that the special meetings have to be posted at least 72 hours in advance, and it says that whenever practicable, 24 hours in advance for emergency meetings. And then when you look at BEDB, it duplicates that information, about 5 calendar days for a regular meeting and 72 hours for a special meeting, but it leaves off that information
so
about the emergency meeting,
you're
whenever
saying-
practicable, at least 24 hours in advance.
I see what you're saying. So you'd like to add whenever practicable, 24 hours?
Well, I don't know if it needs to be, but if you're duplicating that information for the other type of meeting, should you also duplicate it for this type of meeting?
Well, I guess the difference is that, like with agendas, because with agendas, the other full meeting of us, they don't have to have an agenda. If you have an emergency meeting, it's usually to deal with an item, and I'm not aware that there's any, and I can again only count on the experience that I had, that you don't have an agenda per se. You have a reason for meeting, which you have to state. And I guess de facto, that's the agenda. You know, and that point it was, we're meeting because with the selectmen, actually, technically, we only met with the attorney, but the selectmen also showed up to clarify that issue. We didn't send out an agenda. We sent out a notification, so I don't.
It's really up to you guys if you want to add it or not.
I don't have a preference, I'm just wondering. I'm okay either way.
At least we know what to do.
At least you know what.
We know
At least
what to do.
what we can do.
So what do we think? Do we want to add it, or?
I think it's fine if it's because of what it states here. I don't think it needs to be added.
Timothy, do you have an
I
opinion?
think it's good.
You like it the way it is?
I want to, not to prolong this, because it's actually taken some time, but I do want to point out that Jana was right, and
Say that again?
people out there, no, the whole issue, this is actually was really good for me, and that's why it's good to ask questions. I went back and double checked I wanted to add the language about local vendor preferred, and it was added in the two of the districts that I was in, and in both those districts, it was removed with, under exactly what Janet pointed out, that was not good language, and probably could be problematic for, create a liability for the district.
Right. Any other discussion on any other policy? No. Are we ready to take a vote?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? I see 5 in favor, so the vote passes unanimously.
Thank you all. We'll try not to do that to you again.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who worked on those.
Okay, new business. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the Winthrop Public School fiscal year 2021-2022 school calendar. So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion?
I have one question.
Yep.
Is there a typo on November 27th? It's supposed to be vacation.
November 26th, you mean?
27th. On the calendar, it says November 27th, school vacation on the red.
Oh, in the red.
Wait.
It should
July
say
2026.
26.
It's 26, right?
Just an edit thing.
Good catch.
Would this be a time to bring up the late start, Tim?
Yeah, actually, what I'd like to, if you don't mind, if the committee doesn't mind, I'd like to hear what Josh and Amelie have to say about, that they talked about earlier.
I think personally, I like the idea of the late start, and like Mr. Hodgkin said earlier, I think early releases are generally more disruptive to the day than a late start would be, especially if it's only an hour late start. So I think that would be pretty effective.
And Josh, you talked about surveying students.
I just thought, like, I don't know, just opening it up to see what they kind of think. Obviously, you guys have the final say on whatnot, but just kind of getting that student perspective in. I don't know how much experience we all have. I mean, probably you guys more than any of us. But with, like, what works better for students. I mean, it could be a time to test out the waters, I guess, to see what works best and as we move forward. And again, it'll be kind of a weird year because pandemic and all, but I just thought it'd be kind of, we can open it up to see what students will want. I personally won't be here. Maybe, I don't know.
We hope.
We hope. But yeah.
So, Joe, I don't, were you on the committee, the outside committee for late start? It may have been Kristen and Jenny, which is,
You remember me, I just wanted a complete late start,
yeah.
okay? I still do for the upper class.
Okay. And maybe that, was that the difference, was that we were looking at a late start every day?
That's where it started, was that we reversed and have the seniors go in at least an hour later than where they were going. And the grade school would switch and be going in earlier.
Yep.
The way the normal things really work, except in Winthrop.
That's actually, no, that's not true. Sorry. I thought I turned that on. That's, what we do here is what everybody does, and so,
They do
I
that for
wanted to,
athletics, okay, that's the only reason they do it. They don't
I'm
care
really
about
curious.
education.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear more of this conversation, because I was a little bit confused. I think we were talking.
Yeah.
I it seems like this was discussed here, but it was a different issue than, it was the issue you're talking about, and I feel like we're talking about a different issue.
You are.
But I did share with Jana that, God, I don't know how to turn my phone on. There has been at least one system, and maybe more. And again, I don't want to get too terribly deep in the weeds, but the research, this is one of those areas where what we do in schools throughout the country, I have no idea what they do outside of our country, goes completely against what research tells us, and it's what you just said. Younger kids get up and get going much better in the morning than older kids do. Sorry, guys. And so, Biddeford school system did actually try doing that flip-flop, and it failed. It was an epic failure. But it was an epic failure from my perspective, all around reasons. What made it fail down there primarily was the disruption to athletics. They, and it seems to me, and Jenny, you can certainly speak for yourself, but that was part of the question here, is if the whole MVC went to that schedule and it didn't, then everybody make the same, the same changes and whatever. So I guess what I'd like to suggest is that we don't go down there. I'm not ready to go down that road tonight. I think it's a bigger conversation. The question I was hoping we were going to focus on is, I think, more like what Josh and Emily are talking about, is do we have early releases or do we have delayed starts? I said I wasn't going to weigh in, so I'll try not to. I have some strong feelings about it, but it is a little bit weird right now because of, we don't know. The next fall is so uncertain right now that I think it would be, I just don't think it's the best idea to think about right now. Kelly, you were first.
So, it concerns me that it sounds like it's actually a net loss of professional development time to do a 1-hour delay versus an early release, because you're only having 1 hour versus 2 or 3 hours.
Every 1 hour every week.
Okay, but if we do an early release every week, every month.
Once a month.
Oh, so, okay, I understand.
And the reality is, with I'm going to shut up.
No, go ahead.
What turns into an hour delay actually turns into an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes of professional development. It's because people are here, they come in early. We can ask them to come in a little bit earlier, and it just, it ends up being a net gain for professional development time, and it's more about consistency. I'm just concerned, and this is why I was wanting to hear from these guys first, was I think before we make any sort of that kind of change, I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done with not just the students that would be interested in their opinion, but I think we have to talk to the community a lot more about that. So
that was one of my comments, is that I'd like time to be able to gather some comments from people about what they think. In general, I would think that an hour delay every Wednesday would be less disruptive to families than an early release once a month as far as childcare is concerned, but I don't know that every family would really feel that way.
yeah.
So, I'm obviously not ready to vote on that part of that, but I do think if you're talking about only having a 1 hour delay once a week, or however, whatever that looks like. Number one, I want to see what it looks like. What time are we asking kids to come in, and what does that look like? I would love to get, obviously, staff and student input, too, just, again, for that reason. I know sometimes your early release days do end up, your teachers end up staying longer sometimes because meetings do run over, whereas if you had a late start, those meetings can't run over. But the only thing I do worry about then, will things get rushed? Will you run out of time? The morning is a busy time for most teachers anyways, in my opinion. That obviously is an opinion. And so you know, if you come in and you're doing professional development in the morning and then you gotta switch to, then I don't know. I'm not opposed to it, and I think it might be a little bit more receptive to doing it once a month rather than every day like we were looking at. And it's not like you're looking at going later,
No.
right? Your dismissal time would be the exact same, so that wouldn't be affected, because I know some of the other issues with that as well was childcare for the grade school kids, when you had the older kids that used to watch the little kids and how that timing. So sports was another issue, but it was also a childcare issue
Yep.
for families.
I would think it would be a transportation issue in the morning too, for families if they have to bring their child in an hour later, then, and they have to be to work, say, if they're not gonna come in until 10, but they need to be work for 9, that could cause problems for families.
Good.
Something to think about.
Yeah. Families that normally.
So I want to, so I think this is a great conversation. I think we need to have a broader conversation. For me, it still comes down to the uncertainty around what next fall is going to look like. So rather than adopt a calendar and then come back and change it, the changes we made this year to have Wednesdays be the way they are right now, it would be easier to make that kind of change with the calendar that's been presented to you. So,
I also think that if we were gonna take a vote on something like this, I feel like it needs to be put specifically on the agenda so that the public would know that we're actually voting on something this drastically different.
yeah, to me, I personally favor, I pushed hard for the delayed starts every Wednesday, and all of the questions that were things that people brought up, were addressed. I think the test of any sort of big change like that is the places that, like Bedford did the flip, 1 year, not even 1 year. They went back halfway through the year. So I look at places that I know that do the delayed starts, and they have never gone away from it. Once they've established that they've stayed there. So, but I'm with all of you. I think it's something we should say we need to probably next fall form a group and community, whatever.
And there was a group already established, just to let you know, that had looked at this, so I don't know if we maybe won't even try to get that group back up and running.
But it seems to me, based on what you said and what Joe said, is it was a different issue. It was the issue of flipping, having to have the high school and middle school start later and the grade school go earlier. This is not what this is.
Oh, that is, well, yeah, that is, it was, but I think it was called a late start committee, and I know that's semantics, but it was called a late start committee. So, and you're right, that it was also every day, not necessarily.
Yeah, and that's why the history, to me, even if people were inclined, even if you were all in the same space tonight, I would be really reluctant to say vote on this, because you could make an approval of a calendar with delayed start Wednesdays, but if we're part of this community and we're really adamantly opposed to what was being discussed a few years ago, I think you'd be really upset. So I think we need to be aware of the history and go slowly as a result of it.
I just had another comment too, Sue.
Sure.
And I know it says down bottom, religious holidays are listed on the back. I guess I might like to see those on the front, because if we're gonna put Christmas Day on the front, which is a religious holiday, I don't understand why all of them are on the front.
We don't have any room on the front,
Oh,
mostly.
boy. I just caution putting certain religious holidays on the back then and just having Christian ones on the front.
I'm not sure that.
Just remedy.
I don't know, they're not on the back.
Can I just-
They weren't.
No. So let me ask you this, this would be like an Eric Curlin type question. That's the way you guys have done it for some time, apparently. Has it come up as an issue before?
I feel like we've only done it fairly recently, yeah, like it hasn't been forever. I feel like a lot of schools are only doing it fairly recently.
It's the only school system I've ever seen do it. I'm not opposed to it, I just didn't.
Well,
Yeah.
So.
we were one of the first to get it, that we got an award for doing it. But I know what you're saying, it's just, how perfect can you be?
Is part of the reason that they're on the back because they're not a full school closure.
Correct.
But they were also added to the calendar so that when certain activities were planned, they could be avoided.
Sure.
You avoid some of those holidays because sporting events and drama events have been planned in various school systems on those holidays without realizing that they were there because they weren't on the calendar.
How
You know, I
many
looked at the wrong
are we
calendar.
looking at? We
There's
don't
only a
have
few.
That information on that.
It's like 12, right?
Oh, there's 12 additional?
It was a lot.
Wow.
So it's not like we could
And
just.
didn't we
reduce
pass some
them.
type of policy about putting that on the calendar?
Well, it was
There was
quite,
something-
it wasn't, the committee was all in favor of doing it. You know, we had a presentation that came in and asked us to do it, and they were quite excited about the fact we were even gonna list them, okay?
Right.
They
It was some
realized
type of
we'd be that
group that
receptive.
Ms. McLaren was part of that gave us the holidays that would go on the back. And then I believe we had some type of policy or something that we passed saying that we would do that.
I don't know if we had a policy, I do know that we
It's been like
talked about
3 years now.
considerations, like for instance, that it would help both the teachers and the students,
Would you say?
because they didn't know why the students were not there, or they didn't know why they weren't getting their work
I
done
mean,
and
we'll pick
stuff.
one.
And it would be acceptable for other things, and so this would be acceptable. Can I just go back to this early release day?
Sure.
I would like to see in the questionnaire, we have these once a month early release days. And they're extremely worthwhile, there's important topics to discuss and everything else. But is there a problem with the fact that you can discuss a topic this Wednesday or next Wednesday? And then you gotta wait a whole month for the next time you get together.
So again, that is part of the thing, but I will say that not all the administrators are in favor of the early releases. They don't find them as valuable. I mean, there's a lot of reasons not to move in this direction this year. And one of them is that we have a dynamic new, I'm tired of saying nice things about, no, I'm just kidding. But, I mean, you know, Megan is really, that whole professional development time, whether it's weekly or whatever, you know, I think until she's had an opportunity to sort of really work through the year, you know, and as you all know, most of her time, not most of her, but a sizable chunk of her time this year has been focused on remote learning and issues related to that. So the professional development that goes along with whether we do the delayed starts or the early release is going to primarily fall under the coordination domain of Megan. So I think we just have to look at all of these things. And what you just said is exactly the reason that I argue, you know, there's a real continuity to the delayed starts. All the places where I've been, you know, I'm trying not to pick all the controversial issues to work on all at the same time. But you know, this is one that, you know, I would certainly favor moving this direction. But again, Winthrop has some unique history around a related topic that I think is really requires us to slow down. And so if nothing else were true, if we weren't dealing with COVID and we weren't dealing with a new director of teaching and learning, I'd still be saying, let's slow down.
Well, let me just continue this then. It is a question that the staff and you make it okay, easily weigh into. I had thought seeing this a long time ago when we were talking about it, that we would be better off almost as if you were having it every other week. Now, it might mean that you would lengthen the school day up a little bit, the buses wouldn't come quite so early, so you wouldn't have so much time devoted to it. And I do agree that sometimes they go into those meetings, they don't come out for 2.5, 3 hours, it's like having a school committee meeting. Well, this would be short, but they'd be short, but my point is just really the same. There are some topics which need more than just one day a month. They need to be repeated, revisited, see what we've done, this type of thing. I'm not sure if going to school an hour early, an hour later every Wednesday is going to be acceptable in the community. And the group that I talk to the daycare providers, they just get really uptight, nervous about when we do these things because they don't know for sure how many kids are gonna come, but they're willing to accept them. I mean, they're very agreeable, actually. They just want notice. So I just think, you know, it's a good time to have at least somewhat of a conversation with people. And I really think the students should still ask their questions.
I'd be very interested in hearing what they have to say.
What would your preference be?
So we have a lot of foundational work to do if we're talking specifically about curriculum, or if we're talking about professional development, and I kind of see those two closely aligned. Right now, I can tell you that, like in a perfect world, I would be able to rotate through content areas, and that wouldn't be hard to do once a month. Because that would mean that there would be very limited time for me to see each group, and it would all have to happen on that day. And so if I'm thinking about curriculum development or standards mapping and trying to do some of that gap assessment piece that I know is important to the district and is important really to the teachers as we're starting to do some of that work, I would love to be able to have some continuity, but I was on staff during the late start committee. And it was something that was really, our community was very passionate about both directions. And I think that we would really want to be thoughtful moving forward and make sure that we are taking into consideration all the different perspectives as far as curriculum development and ongoing work tweaking that. I think that's great. I would really appreciate the consistent time as we look at, data, student data and assessment. I know a lot of that happens at the grade school right now. That's something that would be happening, more consistently also.
Megan, can you talk a little bit louder?
Yes, I can. So I would say, from those two perspectives, I would prefer to do the weekly piece. I also hear concerns even about is an hour and 15 going to be enough time? There are some professional development pieces that might be more tailored to a longer period of time, but I think it depends a little bit on what our district initiatives are and where we're going with some of those pieces and parts too. So again, kind of what Mr. Hodgkins has said, it's a bigger issue than just, this little piece or this little piece. I think it's really dynamic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So at this point, we'd just be voting on this calendar as it appears, not on late start versus early release.
Right.
That is
Okay.
correct.
So I was looking at the wrong calendar, forgetting that you guys get an updated calendar tonight. So I just want to make sure we're all looking at the right one, because I know I wasn't. And this is what Colleen was saying, trying to squeeze in the days. It was sort of my idea at first, and I kind of let it go, and then it kind of came up a few more times. But this one, what we added today, or yesterday, I guess it was, is notating when the end of the quarter is and when the end of the trimester is. And it really doesn't matter if it's, and this is really just for parental purposes, that they can take a look at it. So if you note, just so you don't think we've lost our minds, and this is what we're struggling a little bit in doing this, the quarter ends 2 days before the last day of school in June. To me, I'm not even sure it's necessary to put that in there, because schools are just going to kind of do what they need to do, and school ends. Some will carry the work expectations till the last day. That's pretty unusual. So just so people know they're on there, that the quarter is going to end and the trimester is going to end, and that's really just a ballpark for the particularly earlier in the year, a ballpark for the parents to have some idea about when that's going to. It's accurate for the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, first trimester, second trimester. And it's, from my perspective, it's accurate for the third trimester, but that's whatever. And it doesn't differentiate whether it's the middle school, high school, or grade school, because if you're a quarter school, that's when your quarters end. If you're a trimester school, that's when your trimesters end. It's something that I had done on other calendars I put together, and it wasn't on this one, and I just feel like was added, so.
So
And
there is
last,
no middle school on that, that's just got kind of, it must be bumped down.
no, I should say,
Yeah, it must be the next line down, it got cut.
I would have taken those out. I wouldn't, I
Okay.
just realized that. Take out the words high school and the words grade school, and it's not, it doesn't matter.
I think, trying to think about, can we put the religious holidays on the front, right? There's a lot of empty space in these boxes.
Really?
Yep, and if we were to change it from, say, August to AUG period, then you could remove even more lines.
You're talking about the yellow box?
I'm just talking yellow and red and gray. And that would make more space for you to be able to put those dates here on the front, if that's something that,
Is 17 religious holidays.
17, okay.
Yeah, add 17 holidays to the front would be so fun.
Okay.
I was just
I don't know, I'd almost like to, and I know it's, maybe it's just a nitpicky thing, I'd either like to see all holidays in the back or move different, but I just feel like it's a total, and I know it's new, and I know that is what we've been doing all along.
No, my thing is, it's just the front and it's the school holidays, the days that we are actually
Yeah.
not in school. The ones
Right,
that
but
want-
for
so
those
it's
who
bad.
celebrate those religious holidays, they're not in school those days either sometimes.
But it's not recognized by the
But
state.
it's not recognized as a whole.
Okay, I just don't wanna see us discriminate.
I think we're doing a great thing by putting them on the back.
I think we're doing a great thing for getting Columbus Day.
And what?
Are we supposed to vote for being over at 9 o'clock?
Oh, yes, we are.
Oh, wow.
We're supposed to vote because we're going past 9.
Yes.
You need to finish the issue you're on, and then you vote
It's
to continue.
9:01 that clock's.
All right.
So are we ready to take?
I just have one other question really quickly. What is the plan for snow days next year? This year we're doing remote learning, so there is no snow day. Is that the plan for next year as well?
As far as I'm concerned, I didn't make that proposal based upon COVID. I remembered, particularly in my presentation, that I was talking about Veronica started that last year. Commissioner Macon very much supports it. So, we're doing it this year. I've not received any negative feedback, so unless I heard differently from the school committee, that would be my plan, is that we would have, snow days would become remote days.
So June 10th is June 10th. There's no
That's it.
wiggle room. Okay.
And do we have to submit a plan for that? No?
No, we have to meet the guidelines, which we talked, two things we have to do is we have to make sure we feed them. And there's the instructional component that we do with the, either setting homework or,
Having Zooms or
there we
whatever.
go, thank you.
Low tech, no tech meetings or
Yep,
assignments?
right.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, so are we ready to vote on the calendar the way it is here?
Yes.
With the 26th changed.
Yes, in the red box.
Yeah, we'll make any appropriate edits. If you find any else after this, then
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, I see 5 in favor, so vote passes unanimously. So now I can entertain a motion to continue our meeting at 9 o'clock.
Second, Kelly moved. I don't know if
Oh,
you heard that.
I did
Second,
not.
yep.
Okay, moved and seconded, discussion. All those in favor?
I'm sorry, I don't get paid that much.
Okay, the vote is 4-1, so
Next time,
it
Tim
passes.
will vote.
I was in the middle there, I don't know.
You gotta go drive,
Well,
get
we're only
over and
gonna do
drive
one
along
thing, so
West
we're gonna
Lawn.
go,
Me
so.
too.
Yes. Okay,
These kids, look at them, they're good
next is I will entertain a motion to approve the Winthrop Public Schools organizational chart.
So moved.
Wait, that's, oh, yeah. Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion.
Yes, I have a question. I was looking at this and wondering why, and again, I just want to preface this by saying it's just a question, it's not a judgment. Why does the grade school have an administrative assistant and a secretary, but that doesn't happen at the other two schools?
Size. Grade school is the biggest building by far, so.
I have just one.
And technically speaking, the high school has 2 secretaries, one's in guidance.
Okay, all right.
I just have one quick question. You had said in your superintendent report that it was revised, and I was just wondering what the revision was.
Revision was, and I don't remember where it was initially, but technology coordinator was put into that line with all the green, what I would call building level or program level administrators, because we had a hard time figuring out the computer technicians belong under that position, and it didn't work right in the other diagram.
So do they fall under the administrative contract?
They do not. And that's not really reflected in this thing. I know it was an issue for former board members. It's a 0 issue for me.
You might remember that Erin brought up tonight that she is going back to having a leader among her people.
Yep.
And we don't have that person listed.
Well, again, to me, it's semantics. She is an SNP manager.
Okay.
We could look at a lot of different subcategories that we don't necessarily do here.
There is a difference in pay between the manager and the leader.
Yeah, but there's not, yeah, I'm not sure there's enough that I would make a change to this.
Okay.
This is really, it's just something I was asked to do, so I think to me, it's pretty accurate.
All those in favor?
Oh, is that it for discussion? Sorry, I was just thinking.
You just be starting your poker game right now.
Okay, so all those in favor?
You just get it.
Okay, 5 in favor, so vote passes unanimously.
She looked at the time.
Public comments.
Are there any public comments?
I don't see any.
None? Okay, none of the others? Okay, school committee comments. Jana?
I just want to thank Jim for efforts in planning for the vaccine rollout for the staff. However it goes, he's very much on the front line of that, and I'm just thankful for that. And good luck to the teams, basketball and skiing, who are participating in championship or in tournaments. That's it.
Joe?
And the girls won today, beat Valley, they had a long ride home tonight. Boys play tomorrow night, or do we play the next night? Point is, I'm really enjoying, as so many people around this community are, the various streaming things that are going on. I was amazed the other night, I was watching hockey, and there was over 120 people who were watching the boys hockey game. And I watched a little bit of the girls, but then somehow I lost it in the thing. But you think about it, I got both the boys and the girls, both hockey and basketball. We get into the middle school, some of those games. That's really great. I only wish we had commentators who would bring us up to date on what the schedule was or what the scores were. Sometimes it's hard to tell how many minutes are left in a game. And I only make that as a suggestion because Tiff can carry those suggestions and make sure they get done tomorrow. But, you know, it's little things like that that just brings back a community sense that all is not lost out there. That's really what the main thing is. And it's nice to see how many people make the attempt to try to sign in. And some people have even made it possible that you don't have to pay $10 a month to do it. That's been good too. And I notice YouTube's being used a lot by some of the schools out there who pick up the feeds like the Rambler does YouTube, which is amazing. But having said all that, that really pleases me, and seems to me like the school year is going along pretty good in spite of it all. And let's continue.
sparked that with how to spend our COVID money. Thinking and looking around the nation, around the state, at schools who are not able to be in person at all because they don't have the right air exchange systems. I really appreciate that you took that as a priority to make sure that that happened for these schools so that our kids could be here. That was really huge, and I'm glad that you took the time to really think that through. Timothy?
Just two things. One, just throwing it out there, if maybe we can look at the agenda length, just so we're not going so late. And number two, I just want to shout out, I kind of did last week, but Ed Van Tassel, the amount of hours he volunteers for the youth for Winthrop on his own time, free of charge, just doing things for kids. Just wanted to, it's appreciated.
Excellent. Josh?
Just spring sports signups were just sent out the other day, so we're just gonna be waiting on those, but that was about it for me.
Emily? I know I spoke briefly last week about March Madness, but next week on Thursday and Friday, we will be decorating hallways. And Josh and I will get on the, kind of doing it as student told.
Oh yeah, wait, do you also, for the Wednesday thing, yeah, actually, sorry, can I take back my time? Yeah, so is that more like of an issue for, like, I know, like we said, like, big thing, but like, I mean, I don't think we love making surveys, I think. But I mean, I don't really mind working on it now, or is this something that we're looking along the lines for next, I guess, fall
Well,
school year?
I think it's perfectly fine to gather that information now. That might help us shape the conversation.
But it would not necessarily be a change for next school year?
Right.
Okay, perfect. Do you guys mind if we like send that over to you guys once we have a draft, and then you guys give us any comments?
That'd be great.
That would be awesome.
Yep.
Great, thank you. I don't have anything else to add, I'll just echo what everybody else said, how's that sound? Okay, now I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session regarding personnel pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? All in favor? I see 5, so vote passes unanimously.
Oh, you're in at 10 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
9:12?
9:12.
And we don't, for the record, for the public, there's no action anticipated coming out of executive session.